Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, cross-ideological space where we come together, talk about issues political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today's kind of a serious topic. So first of all, thank you all for being here. 𝕵𝖎𝖙𝖎𝖙, falsers, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, Grackle, always a pleasure. Nice to see you. And as you get into my YouTube stream, gang, welcome as you come into there as well. We are still waiting on one guest, but hopefully they get here soon. I haven't heard from them. But we're going to be talking today about the legal troubles of Donald J. Trump. Go on.
Sorry, you say his name and I just laughed involuntarily.
Oh.
I apologize. Unprofessional.
It's fine. We're going to talk about whether or not the legal pursuit of, I guess, the pursuit of legal action against him is a witch hunt. We're going to be talking about what it means for the country if he is arrested. What are some of the potential pitfalls of this? What effect is this going to have coming forward? Should he even be arrested as a political figure? Does it count as interfering with the election for 2024 if he's put under legal pressure like this? We're going to talk about all of that today. I wish RJ was here. RJ is probably the Trumpiest Trumper you'll ever Trump, but he's not. So we're going to make do with what we can. But hi, how's everyone doing today? How are you all?
I'm feeling it. What about you, Wick?
Oh, so far so good, but we just started. We'll see how it goes. How about you, Lactoid? You doing good?
Doing great. No, it's a great Wednesday.
Yeah.
However good a Wednesday can be.
Fair enough.
Before we start, I just want the audience to know I may not have an American flag behind me, but I love America just as much as Lactoid. So
you want to borrow one of mine, Brianna?
I do.
Anytime you need an American flag to make an appearance on the panel, you can just raise your hand, and I will hold up as many American flags as you feel is necessary.
So I can beat Lactoid would be ideal.
How about 3? You're destroying the toy now.
That's right.
Those are very small American flags. They don't compare.
They're big in our heart. That's where it matters.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And yeah, I mean, patriotism is a thing, and we could talk about how this plays into that. We can also talk about if he was still a sitting president, right? If he was actually in office. Would that affect everyone's opinions here? But I wanted to give each of you a brief opening statement before we get into it. And just give your general thoughts on the question is, should Donald J. Trump face prosecution, indictment, and arrest for what he is being accused of? And we're going to start with Brianna. Go ahead.
So blanket, disclaimer statement here, we don't know the specific charges. We don't know the evidence. So I just want to say all of this is on my guess of what the charges are going to be. And of course, I'm a reasonable person. I'm going to withhold ultimate judgment. And this does go to trial and it's put in front of me. But I think generally speaking, there are a few things I can say. America is not the only country in the history of the world to deal with corruption with public officials. And for whatever reason, we have chosen to look the other way with both parties, but mostly with Republicans, increasingly through my lifetime. And, after the Iraq War, there was really a sense that we didn't need to have any charges for any of the people that brought us into war, that shame would cause the Republican Party's fever to break and they would come back to reality. Well, what we've seen every single year since that is it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Donald Trump was that fever metastasizing, a president that wholly believes he is above the law and has a long, deep history of blatant illegality in the way that he has conducted himself. So I want the rule of law. When when Lindsey Graham chose not to impeach Donald Trump in the Senate, he said that outside of the Senate, in the justice system, that was where the answer needed to come for Trump. Fair enough. Let's give it to him. I want the rule of law. And to be clear, I want for all corrupt politicians, not just Republicans.
Okay, thank you. We'll get into it in the open, I am sure. Lactoid, go ahead. What are your thoughts here?
Sure. So I agree. We don't know all the specifics. We don't know the specific charges. We only have some ideas. But I believe, based on what I've read and based on some of the absurdity of the leaps that are being made here, I think this is motivated somewhat by Trump derangement syndrome. I think you've heard a little bit already of this is a fever metastasizing. This is something threat that must be taken care of. And I think there's a reason why the Congress is looking into this as being politically motivated. They had apparently it's information since 2018, but of course sat on it until before election campaigning season started. I think that's already suspicious. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the merits of the claims, the accusations against Trump specifically here. I'm not a Trumper. I wouldn't describe myself as a Trumper. And I am not a New York lawyer, but I am a lawyer. And I was looking through a lot of the legal documents on this, and I'm a little bit, or more than a little bit confused as to how they think Trump committed any crimes. At least any crimes in which New York could go after him for what they're saying he did. It's pretty ridiculous. So.
Well, again, we'll get into it in the open, I am sure. We'll see how it goes. And gang, if you're listening, because I don't know if RJ's coming. I hope he gets here, but we're gonna give him another 10 minutes, and if he doesn't show, so before I let Portland go here, if you are a big Trump stan and you want to just jump in, we kind of need one here. So just jump in the Discord and I'll do a little DM back and forth, make sure you're okay, and then we'll get you in. I'm really kind of upset that
time for Grackle to make his on-screen debut. Oh, and is Biden's a fraud?
Yeah,
is
I think that's probably Dingo, but I'll check. Anyway, go.
Definitely Dingo.
Yes. Anyway, go ahead, Portland. Let's hear what you got to say.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Portland is burning on Twitch and Twitter, mostly just hang out on WhickTV panels and talk about things that I find interesting. Eventually, I'll make some kind of content out of it too. But I think that it's telling that the only diehard Trump supporter on the panel chose not to show up to make his case. I think that you'd have to be rather delusional to look at the body of evidence that we have over the years of Trump's wrongdoing and assume that there is absolutely no validity to the current allegations that he misappropriated campaign funds to pay hush money to a porn star with whom he was having an affair. I think that is pretty clear if you're being objective. I think that it's arguable that it's being maybe over-exaggerated in its seriousness for political reasons, and I think that's really the only criticism that's worth entertaining here. I'm eager to hear Lactoid's argument as to whether he feels like the laws that have been broken, assuming everything that we know or that we assume right now is true, whether Lactoid feels like there's just not a severe enough crime being committed here to charge the president of the United States, former or current, or whether it's just an issue of like the crime itself not being serious, or whether we think that there's like fabrication or manufacturing of charges, or like I said, exaggeration of the facts for like political motivations. Looking forward to the argument. So thanks for having me.
Okay, so yeah, apparently it isn't Dingo, the person DM'd me. It's not Dingo. It's someone else that we know. But again, I want to give RJ 5 more minutes just in case his house caught on fire, or he's stuck in traffic. I don't know.
Fair enough. Wick, I want to respond to an ad hominem attack right now very quickly. Lactoid, I want to be really clear with you. I love this country. I'm going to assume you love this country too. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I am someone who has studied the news very carefully. I'm not emotional. I'm not angry. I have watched his presidency and watched his behavior. I have valid, real, serious misgivings over the way he has conducted himself. And this is the reason that he has found himself fighting off lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit and impeachment after impeachment. So just moving forward on this panel today, I have a proposal to you. I'm going to talk to you with respect. I'm going to assume you love this country. I'm going to assume you're bringing your own analysis to this, to look at this through. And I'm going to ask you to pay me the same respect back, please.
I have no problem treating with respect, but I think it would be absurd to say that you're not emotional about this when you describe somebody as a fever metastasizing.
I think the
That
Republican
is
Party
deliberately, hold on, that
has,
is
I said the
deliberately,
Republican
hold on.
Party.
Regardless, right? When you're saying this is a fever metastasizing, that is that's emotionally charged language. You are obviously putting forward some kind of, and you can do that. I'm not saying you're wrong for having emotions, but like you're going to portray your emotions. I'm going to criticize them. That's perfectly fine to do on a panel.
I think that's a fairly sexist argument. I'm not being emotional here. And the Republican Party has taken a further and further break from reality the longer I have been alive. It happened with imaginary weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It happened with birtherism. And this is a continuing trend. Additionally, every single time there have been these claims in the media that the fever was about to break with the Republican Party. We thought that in the aftermath of the Iraq War, where we went to war over imaginary weapons of mass destruction. We did that after birtherism and Obama, and Republicans seem to have thought that after the January 6th insurrection. That specifically is what I'm talking about. The audience can make up their own mind if I'm being emotional about those facts or not.
Great. Let's leave it for the audience to make up their mind about whether or not calling somebody or calling a party a fever metastasizing is emotionally charged language.
I want to.
I think it's probably pretty obvious, but sure.
Just really quick, I want to get to the substance of these things, right? I think that there is a question that Portland had that I'd like Lactoid to answer. Of, do you think that it is simply the charge itself is too weak, therefore you don't think he should be indicted and arrested on this particular charge? Or do you think he just shouldn't be indicted and arrested because it's too dangerous or for whatever reason, right? Can
I can
you,
think of a
be more
couple
clear?
reasons to just like build that question out a little bit. I can think of a couple reasons why you could make the argument that it would be disadvantageous either domestically or abroad for our, international standing and our divisive current political culture in the United States to prosecute the former president and presumed like front runner for the Republican nomination in 2024. I understand that there's political capital to be expended on both sides. I just think that it's a principled position that's worth taking.
Sure. So I'm not opposed to indicting people, former presidents, for committing crimes, right? If they committed crimes, it's perfectly fine. I have an issue with these particular charges. A couple things. Hush money. Hush money is not illegal. Confidentiality agreements are perfectly legal. I have drafted them. I have used them. They are well within legal purview. You can send them to people and say, hey, I'll give you this much money if you don't talk about something. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing illegal.
Nothing's being accused. There's nothing about the accusation that says that that's wrong in principle, just that he misappropriated campaign funds to do so.
Correct.
So, well, we're starting there. I just want to start out with that. The second thing, misappropriated campaign funds. This is sort of the issue of you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can use campaign funds to acquire confidentiality agreements that they benefit your campaign. There's nothing wrong with that. The allegation is that not the Trump campaign, but that Cohen was paid by the Trump organization from non-campaign funds. And the argument being made is, well, paying off Stormy Daniels was actually a electoral action. This was actually some kind of furtherance of his campaign, and it wasn't being paid for through campaign funds, and that's the problem. Now, the problem is, prior to 2018, Cohen had repeatedly stated that, and this is, I think, very obvious, that this was not had nothing necessarily to do with his campaign, but it was about maintaining Trump's personal character, especially because he's married. Now, arguably, I suppose any single time you spend money to make yourself look better and you are also running for some office, technically that could be twisted to be some kind of electoral expense. But I think that's just blatantly ridiculous, right? That's just blatantly ridiculous. What happened here is, I mean, if we're just being frank, he cheated on his wife, and Cohen tried to help him out by trying to get the person he cheated with to sign an NDA. And I mean, not only did she renege on that NDA, but there's no, first of all, Trump has denied even knowing about this, but even if he knew about it, that wouldn't actually change the fact that it's not illegal. The only way they could prove that he did something wrong is if they can find like some direct, and if this exists, then I'll eat my words, some kind of direct communication from Trump to Cohen saying, hey, in the interest of pursuing my campaign, please pay Stormy Daniels this amount of money so I can win, right? That would be suspect, right? But but unless they have something like that, they're fucked.
So
can I
your understanding really quick.
Stop. Both of you stop. Both of you stop. We'll go Brianna, and then you can respond, Portland. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say super quickly, Lactoid, I am perfectly prepared to just agree with everything you're saying here. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I have to go with what the media is reporting from lawyers. And I think the direction, the analysis that I've read seems to indicate that this is certainly the weakest of all of the cases that have come forward. So I'm perfectly I just want to really be clear. I'm not hanging the fate of the United States on this particular charge. I do want to ask a clarifying question, though. Have you worked much with filing FEC documents in your career? No. Okay. I've done this a lot, man. I've done this a lot. I do it every day. I've got a 2-hour meeting with my lawyer tomorrow about FEC documents. And I have to tell you, we take compliance with FEC law in how you can spend money extremely seriously. Mistakes happen, but I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you from my estimation as someone that does work in this field and spends more time on compliance probably than any other issue except for fundraising, this is such a blatant misuse of campaign resources. For me, it's so obviously not something you should do. There's no lawyer in the entire world that will give you an all clear on this. And it's obviously not the strongest case, but I can tell you the culture of organizations genuinely trying to comply with FEC stuff, this is just, it feels egregious from my perspective. Does that make sense to you?
I hear you. And I think it's also important to note that the FEC isn't really involved in this. It's a New York indictment from a DA. But the one thing I would correct is, again, this wasn't paid out of election funds. This was paid out from the Trump organization. It had nothing to do with the election.
But it runs afoul of campaign finance law.
Well, the argument is it might if paying Stormy Daniels was a campaign action. That's the question. And this is where the stretch is, because again, is paying somebody to not say something damaging to your personal reputation, potentially damaging to your marriage, could that also serve a valid campaign purpose? Likely. In the same way showering does, right? If you show up in the campaign stage unshowered, it's going to look bad. People might not like, oh, that person's unkempt, but it would be ridiculous to have to report, your shower bills as campaign expenditures because, hey, that was used for an electoral purpose.
You can actually do that, but that's a whole nother discussion.
You don't have to.
Yeah, you do.
You have to report your water bills to the amount that you use for showering to the FEC.
Going out of your way to something like a hotel, or do you remember the story about John Edwards' haircuts and how expensive those were? Certainly those kinds of things do end up in FEC reports. Childcare shows up in FEC reports. There are all kinds of things. I once had gamer-gators go after me for eating a lot at one particular restaurant because it showed up in my FEC report. So yeah, you do actually have to report things like that.
If it's used, yeah. I mean, that's surprising to me if it's a particular restaurant that you happen to be at. Unless the
receipts are in the report.
Unless there was something, it was related somehow to some kind of campaign activity. The question here is whether or not this was more related to his marriage, which was what Cohen was saying before 2018, and the position of his former attorney as well.
You really in all honestly though, are we taking the position that in August, of 2016, the National Enquirer solicited Stormy Daniels for an expose on her affair with Donald Trump to get him in trouble with his wife? and that Michael Cohen and Donald Trump conspired to kill that story to make sure that he didn't have like an awkward dinner with his wife, not because he was in the midst of a presidential campaign and was the Republican nominee. Like, are we really taking that position in good faith, or are we just kind of doing whatever we can to muddy the waters there?
Well, no, this is the question, right? So that could very well be their intention. But prior to 2018, that's what Cohen was saying. And to date, that's what his former attorney, Robert Costello, said that he said. That was the idea. Now, is it also, again, personal reputation does have a campaign effect. I can't deny that. Of course it does. But then if you want to like draw those lines, it gets ridiculous. And not only, it doesn't have to be ridiculous, by the way, or I guess it would have to be ridiculously ridiculous, because John Edwards, somebody brought up John Edwards. He was investigated and actually had a trial. My understanding, over $1 million in payments because he got his mistress pregnant, and he wasn't convicted. He wasn't convicted, and so and that was way more clear cut than this. So the likelihood that he's going to be convicted is just
two questions for you. Well, one question for you, and then I want to let Biden's a fraud in here.
Oh boy.
Nice to
again. This
nice
is
to have a
small risk since RJ no showed on me, but we kind of need a more Trumpian perspective here to kind of balance these out. But Biden, I'll just call you fraud. If you're not respectful, if you're not matching the energies, we're gonna take it away. But before I let you in to Lactoid, do you think that the Edwards in that case should have been convicted based on the evidence that you've seen of it? Like whether or not he was or not, right? Do you think that they just went easy on him because he was a nominee, or do you think that they should have prosecuted him?
I think they went easy on him because the laws are the laws here are actually way more gray than people like to admit. The Edwards case was much more clear because he was making the payments by check and directly lying on the memos. He was I think one of the checks was for like bookcase, right? He was labeling them as campaign funds under the wrong items, and then in order to mask the fact that they were mistress payments. But honestly, if he had just made the payments to the mistress from the campaign fund and labeled it paying off the mistress so I don't lose the election, that would be fine. That'd be totally fine with me.
Okay. Fraud, go ahead. What are your thoughts here? Do you think Trump should be arrested?
It's pretty stupid because this happened how many years ago? And they're just now bringing it up because of why? Because he's supposedly going to run in 2024, which honestly, I hope he does win. But that's a whole different other topic. It's pretty stupid because I get why they're doing it, but it's also really the laws and how they're coming about it is really just very weird. And
so say he did break a law. Okay, let me help you out, Fraud. So say he did break a law, right? He is guilty of election fraud, election payment fraud. Do you think that he should, even if he's running for president, right? Even if he is on the campaign trail and a contender for 2024, why do you think he shouldn't be arrested for that?
As I'm going to say, innocent until proven guilty. All the evidence still has not come out yet, so I know some of the evidence. I do not know all of the evidence. And because of what's happening, we do not know what all of the evidence or what the charges are, frankly. So until we know exactly what the charges are, what the evidence, till the trial happens.
I want to ask both of you a question. I appreciate the fact that you're kind of taking this on super, super short notice, and I'm not asking everybody to have all the answers. None of us have all the evidence because that's not how the legal system works. But the question that I have for the two of you is, if evidence is sufficient to prove that Donald Trump has committed a crime in the way that this payment was arranged, are you okay with the justice system pursuing an indictment on those grounds, assuming there is adequate evidence to do so, like there would be with any other criminal case?
Yes, if there's adequate evidence, then yes, I do support them indicting him.
Well, then all of us agree here. I mean, this is great. All of us
We're all
love
on
this
the same page.
country, and all of us want
Is
to
it
have
great?
this rule of law.
Well,
Lactoid, just to back up, like, I agree with you. These charges strike me as fairly weak on their face, though as a, political professional, it kind of offends me to see someone going so weak with the rules. But I was really, really worried that we would have Republicans coming on here today and saying we should not have the rule of law. This really makes me
going to have
feel
one.
much better about the state of the country, because no Democrat I ever saw came to John Edwards' defense. So maybe things are better than I had surmised.
I think the important
comment about the timeline, Biden's a fraud. I think that it's reasonable to have questions about the timeline, especially if you're not like a legal professional, which I'm not either. But I know that
Neither am I.
just in the case of regular criminal court cases, you can sometimes take a very, very long time to see charges actually filed after the process of collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. And in this case, getting information from the informant, Michael Cohen, starting in presumably 2018 when he was charged with his own crimes. So this is a process that takes a while. The wheels of justice turn slowly. And unfortunately, if you have a shitload of money, you can usually do a lot of things to stall that process to a pretty significant degree.
Well, I guess...
No, I have a question for Lactoid. Why are they pushing the arrest on and on? Because they said they were going to do it yesterday. Then they said they were going to do it today. Then they were going to say they're going to do it next week. I guarantee you they'll do it when the elections process starts, because that's how it works.
Well, so here's what's going on. So and again, this is what I think. I don't know this. This is what I think, but looking at the timeline here and looking at the facts. My understanding is that Cohen was convicted in 2018, which means that there was a time beforehand in which evidence was coming out and they were collecting evidence on Cohen. I understand the wheels of justice move slowly, but 5 years, 5 years slowly. I think the timing is particularly relevant when you look at, they would charge, the grand jury, who, by the way, almost never refused to recommend charging somebody. And then, real quick, and then, that gets into place. And then we are on the cusp of campaign season. Right. So throughout the whole campaign season, what are his political opponents going to be able to say? Well, he's currently under, he's been charged and, is awaiting trial for this awful crime. That's something that I think is
Boyd, I need to call you on this. Hold on. I need you
to state something.
First of all, Portland, before you do that, are you finished, Lactoid? I want him to get it out loud.
I'm not quite finished. If I said something incorrect, please correct me. Now.
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So, now, we're going to have that whole process happening during the campaign season. Now, why do they keep dragging it on and on? Well, according to Politico, right? This is Politico's own analysis. They agree with me that grand juries almost never refuse, especially in New York, or especially in New York against a Republican candidate. But if it indicated that they might not do it, the prosecution would suspend the proceedings. And what happened just recently? They announced they were suspending the proceedings. I don't think this is going anywhere. And I think the reason why they haven't taken it somewhere is because they have no ground to take it anywhere. That's my analysis, just based on what I'm seeing and the actions I'm seeing. I don't know for sure, but
go ahead, Portland.
All right, correct me.
Okay,
Portland.
Toyd, I need to point out that you're skeptical of the timing in this case, and when they're choosing to try to attempt to bring charges, but you see no reason to be skeptical of the timing of Stormy Daniels' affair with Donald Trump coming almost 10 years before she was in negotiation with the National Enquirer during 2016 election season, after Donald Trump had already won the nomination. That timing should be ignored, because it's actually a very plausible explanation that he was just trying to bury that story to stay in good graces with his wife, not to obfuscate the nature of his behavior in favor of his in service of his campaign. I just think that your skepticism of one and your willingness to accept the other kind of bear a bias that I think makes it really hard to take that position seriously.
No, so what I'm pointing out is that they have to find that Trump intentionally did this beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Just a hunch or like that probably happened is not enough here. That's what I'm pointing out, right? He has a ironclad defense here. Well, no, it wasn't for the campaign. It was because I didn't want my wife and the world to know that I cheated with a a filmed prostitute. Essentially, is what happened. Now, so if you ask me, like, what do I think is more likely than not? I'm gonna have a different opinion there, but that's not the standard that we're looking at. Now, as to the point of the National Enquirer, my understanding is that, of course, the payment's going to happen around the time that the National Enquirer is likely to leak that story, or likely to publish that, or likely to put that out. And so, are you telling me the National Enquirer got the rights to that story in 2006? Or did they get the rights?
No, the National Enquirer was attempting to purchase the rights in August of 2016, which is what began the series of events leading to the hush money payment, right, and which is the reason that it's associated with the election season and the fact that he was already the Republican nominee for the presidential election of that very same year, rather than it coming out at any point prior to that, even though she could have solicited the National Enquirer for rights to the story at any time. But the only time that it was valuable to a significant degree was in the run-up to the election, and the reason it was valuable is because it would directly influence people's perception of the candidate.
Portland, yes, I accept all of that, and this is like the relevant point here. I don't deny that Stormy Daniels probably did this, and the National Enquirer probably did this because this would be the time that it'd be most valuable, and that also makes sense. That lines up with why the NDA would be around that time as well. That doesn't necessarily mean it was for campaign purposes. It just means that it was being pushed by people who had it had campaign purposes in mind. A, B, there could be like a valid campaign purpose why it's being pushed, but a non-campaign purpose why it's the NDA is being put out there. Hey, I know you're pushing this now because the campaign is on, but even if this happened 5 years earlier, we'd probably still give you this amount of money in order to not fucking talk about it because we don't want you to talk about this. 2 and 3. Here's the final point. Even if they can show that the Trump campaign was involved in this, in order to find Trump guilty of the Class E felony, they have to find that Trump personally did this.
I know.
That's
You already
laid out.
You already laid out that requirement. I'm on board with that requirement. I understand it. I'm pointing to the fact that you're saying there's like possible, perfectly reasonable explanations for A, but no plausible explanation for B. B being like the timing of the indictment versus the timing of the payout. And I think that those are just like extremely similar situations, and you're choosing to view them through very different lenses.
We've already gone through this. We've already gone through the back and forth.
I'm not doing them differently.
I get it.
I have a question, Wick.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, Lactoid, and first, I genuinely mean this. I don't want you to feel like this whole panel is just ganging up on you. Like, you came here to defend this today, and I genuinely respect it. And I respect your legal experience. I think it's bringing a lot to this conversation. I do want to push back, though, because you said the timing, in your view, looks suspicious. Are you familiar with the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel memo, about the possibility of basically indicting a sitting president? Are you familiar with this?
I'm not familiar with the particular memo, but I'm guessing this is we can't do it.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's really interesting because this actually happened during the Clinton era. Because a bunch of people were going after Bill Clinton. The argument there was it basically puts an undue burden on a sitting president to have to fend off these kinds of legal charges while they're president because it undermines executive authority. I have to say, having seen it applied to both parties, I can at least understand the logic there, right? So I'm willing to stand by that, right? So, but because of that, I have to tell you, like, seeing these charges brought forward when it's really not that long after Trump left office, to my view, this seems like an utterly reasonable timeline. Like, he could be charged. The wheels of justice started spinning. I'm sure there was an election in New York. The prosecutor looking at this changed a few times, and they eventually arrived at this conclusion. To my view, this timing doesn't look suspicious. It strikes me as very, very credible.
Sure. I understand that position. I don't agree with it. I think 2 years is still a long time for a grand jury, especially. And when you look at what the grand jury is presenting, of course, a lot of that's been hidden. There's some indication that not all the evidence is being presented, at least according to Robert Costello. But I think 2 years is indicative of something. And I think the fact that we're on the cusp of campaign season, I think, is indicative of something. And that's just the time. Again, I don't know for sure. I even said that. It's just the timing to me seems a little bit suspect.
But don't you need a little bit more than just the timing feels a little bit weird to make your case when you are making the exact opposite case for the intentionality behind the payoff? Like, it just seems
I would
very,
not make
very
my, yes, I would not
in,
make
a really simplistic way.
I would not make my case in a court of law. What I would say is that there's enough suspect there that we should probably investigate. And that's what the House Republicans are doing, right?
Do you think that's a okay?
I mean,
I want to let Fraud in. I want to let Fraud in for a little bit. Go ahead, Fraud.
I mean, do we not see the timeline? November, he said he was going to run for president. 3 months or 4 months later, this all unfolds.
This is not a case. This isn't an argument.
No, when the debates are going to happen very soon, do we not see
the primaries haven't
the lines adding up? I mean,
this isn't how you make an argument. You don't just like pick the details that confirm the thing that you already would have that you already thought going in and then just ignore everything else. There's obviously Lactoid. You think there's perfectly good reasons why it would have taken 10 years for Stormy Daniels to sell her story. I think there's probably perfectly good reasons that the justice system would be bringing charges now instead of in November, in January, in July. So I don't think that there's any real reason to address one as if it's implausible and the other as if it's super acceptable.
I need to correct something because you keep misunderstanding me. When you look at the timing of what Stormy Daniels is pursuing, I have no doubt in my mind. Okay, now could I prove it in a court of law? Probably not. But personally, I have no doubt in my mind that she waited until the most inopportune moment for Donald Trump to basically push this. I for campaign purposes, I have no doubt about that. But that doesn't necessarily follow that the addressing of that is also a campaign purpose. Does that make sense?
I think given Michael Avenatti being involved with this, someone who I think any reasonable person can look at his actions and see he was very interested in having a maximum impact on the media and even speculated about running for president at one point. I think that's a very reasonable conclusion to draw. And I really mean this. I want to compliment you. I think the conclusions you're coming at make sense to me, and even though I don't agree with them. In Portland, I think if I could just share something to give him the most charitable view I could. I've worked with a lot of lawyers, and lawyers, generally speaking, you have to kind of separate between what they think may be true and the case they could professionally make in a court of law. Those are two different standards, and what I'm hearing from Lactoid is that that's what he's trying to communicate here.
I wanna kind of come at this from maybe a different angle, and I'm still really, really mad at RJ right now. He was this is why I have 6 people, and usually not 4, because I can't hang my hat on so few a number. I will say this. Is there any validity, right, to people who are worried that by arresting Donald Trump, you are going to create civil strife such that even if he is guilty of this, that it is not worth the risk to the country, that we are so divided right now, that we are so politically charged at this moment, that if we were to take that action, our institutions would simply break. Is there any validity to that argument? Why or why not? Go ahead.
I think that's probably the best argument, in all honesty, at least the best one that I've heard, is that indicting a former president, a presidential candidate, someone so important to half of the country over something that probably wouldn't be worth pursuing such aggressive criminal charges for if it were just like your average person is too damaging to the state of the country, to half of the country's perception of our political and legal institutions. I think there's a valid case to be made there, but I think that it's more valuable to project like a moral consistency to our populace and the world.
Is there a point where you would say it's too much? Like, is there a a place that the country could be at where you would say, no, I think the risk is too great?
No.
Okay, so even if you knew 100% that by doing this the nation would dissolve, you would still say yes, go ahead?
A nation that can't prosecute its political leaders because the nation is too unstable is bound to fail for other reasons. I don't think that there's any way you can avoid it.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that. You know, America's not the first country to have to struggle with corrupt leaders. You know, France ended up putting their own former president under house arrest, I believe, for a year for a somewhat similar charge, basically misappropriating campaign funds. I'm not a defund the police kind of progressive, right? I think that our police exist to you know, enforce laws, enforce the rule of law, and you know, make sure everybody has their day in court. And to me, I think the risk actually goes the opposite way. I really mean this. If you do not believe that America has a very serious problem with the powerful and the connected experiencing a different justice system than the rest of us, please raise your hand right now. I don't see anyone raising their hand. I think we all feel that the rich, the powerful, the corporations, the well-connected, they're experiencing a very different set of justice than we are. And I think if we believe in this country, we do need to take the rule of law very seriously. And I will say this on this panel to you, Lactoid, you want to start investigating some Democrats for corruption? I'll tell you right now, I don't believe the way they're doing the stock market stuff. It doesn't smell legit to me. I would love someone to investigate that and let the chips fall where they may. I think overwhelmingly in this country, we need more prosecution for corruption. I mean that for white collar crime. I certainly mean it for politicians. I think if you want to restore public trust in America, that is the most important thing we can do to get there. If we don't prosecute things like this, I think it just adds to this cynicism that all of us feel about our political system.
Is there not, though, to push back slightly on you,
please,
Brianna, is there not a legitimate criticism that can be levied that this will lead to the weaponization of prosecution, like we saw with Hillary, the weaponization of investigations against her over and over and over and over and over again, right? Causing her to sit through hours and hours of meetings and councils and all that things. Do we not? Is there not a legitimate fear that this could become the new normal? That any politician that becomes prominent enough will simply be buried in these investigations, accusations, media reports, prosecutions, etc.?
Sure. If the justice system is done correctly, the Justice Department is shielded from the political process. I'm sure you remember there was an incident where Bill Clinton talked to his attorney general when he saw her on a plane when she was investigating that. Everyone universally condemned Bill Clinton, myself included, because it seemed like interference in the justice system. I would hope that my Republican friends would hold themselves to that same standard, with not putting their thumb on the scale with the Justice Department. If they do, you know, I think it could cause more damage to our country and our Constitution, but it would be my hope that Republicans would believe in the rule of law just as much as I do.
And go ahead.
I could build. I'm going to burn a bridge potentially, and then I'm also going to build one. I agree. The rule of law is important. I swore to do that, right? To believe it's important is what I do. And it's important for everybody. My understanding is there's 4 major scandals that Trump is, people think that Trump might get indicted on. There's this one, the Georgia voting one, January 6th, and then documents that are in Mar-a-Lago. I think the first 3 are complete bullshit. I don't think there's no chance January 6th. Any chance Georgia. I don't think any chance on this one. The Mar-a-Lago one's a little bit different. It's a little bit concerning. And this is also one that it turns out Biden was doing the same fucking thing. I don't think that going after Trump, I think, could potentially piss a lot of people off, and they're not right. I don't think it's right to get angry if there's a just indictment and there's a just prosecution. But I think what people are going to be more upset about is a perceived favoritism. And so I really like what you said, Brianna, when you said, hey, go after the Democrats too. I think if for the Mar-a-Lago stuff in those documents, if they went after Trump, but then, let's say Biden is done with office or whatever, and then they go after him too, I don't know how pissed people would be if they went after them both. If they showed, hey, like, doesn't matter who you are, it's not just going against Trump. If you fuck up with like putting confidential documents where they're not supposed to be, we go after you, right? Yeah. And so if that's the case, if Trump did it, then he should be indicted if he did it, because just because
I gotta ask, do you think there are pretty significant differences so far in like the details that we've been given about those 2 documents cases, the response from the Biden legal team versus the response from the Trump legal team, the fact that they actually had to raid Mar-a-Lago to get those documents back versus the Biden administration willingly relinquishing them when asked? I mean, like, is there any reason to feel like we need to look beneath the surface before we just rush to the position that, they need to treat these 2 things equivalently to make a point?
Well, the punishment can be proportional to what, how grievous the crime is. But I don't think that actually the punishment should happen either if the crime was committed either way. So Biden might not get as much time.
Did the same fucking thing, quote unquote.
Yeah, so it's the same idea as like if I run to a store and I grab like a box worth $200 and I run out the door, compared to if I run in and grab $4,000, there's a difference, and there's going to be a difference in punishment. But if I say we should punish more thieves, they both committed theft. They should both be punished for theft.
Yes.
And I think
one of the facts that you're missing, Portland, is that with Trump, they had the ability to get all the documents the first time back in April when they were at his house or whatever month it was before it, and they decided not to take it.
Also, the FBI did raid Biden's house.
Yeah, they did.
They raided one of the residencies recently, right? But that was like not because they had been refused access to anything there. It was because they were looking for stuff that they didn't know that they, like, whether or not they'd been given access to. As far as the stuff that was reported, the stuff like the classified documents that they were reported as having been found at the Biden house, those were, to my knowledge, reported, discovered, reported, and returned upon request. Those weren't the things that they were raiding the Biden residence for. I don't think that we ever got any information, or we haven't gotten any information yet, as to whether there was anything of a criminal nature found during the raid of the Biden residence in Delaware.
Can I jump in here really quickly? Portland, I obviously share your assessment. I think there's a wide difference of intent here. That said, look, it is unquestionable that there is some extremely sloppy handling of classified documents in DC. If you read about the history of the structure, the bureaucratic structure in DC that exists to classify documents, you're going to read about a process that's completely broken and can't pick up with things. So that's aside. I think we both agree there's a wild difference in intent here. But we are talking on this call about public trust, about public faith in the justice system. And the way I feel is like, if both of them broke the law here, let them both have their day in court. Prosecute
I'm not disputing that by any means.
Have a different outcome here. I think that would be fantastic for making Americans.
You gotta let her finish.
I'm saying. I'm going to finish what I'm saying. I think that's really, really important to let people see the Justice Department working. So, I also wanted to push back just a little bit, Portland, and say I don't share your assessment on the Georgia case. I actually think that's very smart. I think it's a very strong case. I think every American out there can hear that clip about Donald Trump and all the votes he's looking for. And trying to pressure Raffensperger. I feel like that is a very strong case in my view.
I think Lactoid made that point rather than Portland, but fair.
Sure. Can I clarify? Yeah, all Americans can listen to the clip. I would advise all Americans, though, to listen to the full audio if you want to hear.
I'd like to clarify real quick. I'd like to clarify my position re the Biden-Trump comparison. If Biden is found to have committed any kind of crime and there is sufficient evidence to charge him for it, just like they should with the Trump administration and any people involved in crimes on their behalf, they should do so with the Biden administration and the Democratic institution. My objection to Lactoid was in referring to the situations as they're doing the same shit, which I think creates a sense of flat equivalency that aids kind of the muddying of the waters around what we're actually talking about, and creates a kind of false equivalency that people who have a legal expertise maybe should, are the people that we look to be a little bit more detailed and a little bit more thoughtful with their phrasing.
Same principle, different scale. Is that better?
Yeah, but killing someone is like the same across all different, like there's justifiable manslaughter, there's murder, there's homicide, like there's all these different ways that you can kill someone and all these different like legal categories that it can fit into. They're all functionally the same thing. And I just find it a little bit sloppy to just give the surface level, they're doing the same shit analysis with no sense of nuance if you want to portray it honestly.
If Biden was like was keeping confidential documents where he shouldn't have, would he be charged under the same statutes as Trump would?
I hope so.
Presumably, yeah.
So if it's under
I
the same
think that
statutes,
refusing to relinquish those documents upon formal request would probably create a secondary like compounding factor worth consideration, right? Like if two people are asked, hey, we know you have these documents, you need to turn them over, even if you didn't intentionally take them, one person turns them over and the other person says, fuck you, get a warrant. Like, yeah, there's going to be a difference in the way that we consider those two parties, right? Like even in in the legal system, they're going to treat those two parties differently.
Correct. I think, like I've said multiple times now, there might be a difference in scale. Okay. I'm talking about the principle, right? The principle is they both did something that they weren't supposed to do. Potentially, if it comes to harboring confidential documentation. Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying that there is a further wrongdoing in saying, "Oh, you found we have these documents. Fuck you, can't have them back."
Can I jump in here because I really love this bridge we just built. I feel like we're all in agreement here. Lactoid, I would like to try, and maybe I'm not going to be successful, but I would like to try to, as someone who works with raising money and spending money on political campaigns every day, I'd like to at least try to make the case that you should care about this as much as you care about classified documents. So what we have in a post-Citizens United world is a lot of dark money flowing into politics, right? I understand there's a discussion about Citizens United, but the overall thing you should know is that when it comes to campaigns being run freely and openly, where you can tell where the money is coming from, the brakes are off. Additionally, the FEC under Donald Trump for many of those years did not have enough of a quorum to meet and aggressively prosecute many of these campaign finance violations. So overall, I really want anyone out there listening to this to know that for me, as a professional, I take my FEC reports extremely seriously. I comply with them as best as I can. I talk to my lawyer regularly. I try to go above board and then a little bit further. But I want people to know there's not the level of oversight you deserve in making sure your elections are run fairly and that the money is accounted for openly and honestly. I think in this case, overall, across the board, if we can agree that, like, if the Democrats are doing some things wrong with classified documents, I would like to encourage you to adopt a similar approach when it comes to FEC violations here. I would like to see the FEC be much more aggressive in how they prosecute these crimes across the board. Because I can promise you, with the lack of oversight, campaigns are going out there, they're spending money in ways that are borderline, probably illegal, and no one is out there checking it in the way the American people deserve.
Yeah. So
go on,
well,
please.
I mean, quickly, if the advocacy is, we need to have an FEC that more aggressively pursues people who commit these violations and issues them fines. My understanding is that basically every presidential campaign gets fines, right,
Sure.
for messing shit up.
Yeah. There's a different. Everyone gets fined. Like there's a difference in malfeasance and a fine, right?
Right. Everyone gets fines. I'm fine with the fines. With this case in particular, though, I don't see like a former lawyer who's before was saying, this was when he actually made the payment. This was due to like protecting my client's personal reputation. Now is saying that it was because he was directed by people at the Trump campaign or worked with people at the Trump campaign, not Trump himself. That's important. I just don't see that as a valid, I don't see that as a campaign expense, right?
Wow.
You're paying somebody off to not talk about the affair you had. That's what we're talking. Like when I think about campaign expenses, I'm thinking about like commercials and flyers and hiring people to like run your campaign and driving around and like canvassing, that kind of shit. I'm not thinking of, oh shit, my wife might find out about the fact I fucked a porn star.
Exactly. You're not thinking about the fact that your wife would find out about it. You're thinking about the fact that if it gets out and published, it could hurt your political campaign. That is the point. He does not.
All embarrassing things are campaign now.
That this man who has the grab him by the pussy tape didn't get him in enough trouble with his wife. Like he had to bury this story to have a smooth ride at home. It wasn't like, this is just a silly level of like hiding behind the thinnest level of plausible deniability. The fact that like we can't put a text message that says this is the exact series of decisions that we're making on behalf of the campaign into the record because we don't physically have it, because nobody would have it in this case. Like that we're going to go with the much sillier, much more like convenient excuse that he was like that the person who was obviously his lawyer at the time gave what I would call like the excuse that I would give if I was the guy's lawyer and I was trying to cover up my misdoings. Like obviously there's no reason to expect that his lawyer like while still being employed by him would confess that like, yes, this was misappropriation of campaign funds, or this was done with the intent to influence the campaign. This person
I just think that like the window of things that should be considered like campaign expenses should be like specified and narrow, and paying off like a hooker should not be within that.
I want to ask directly.
I think you should expect more. I really do. I hoped I could convince you should expect more, but I see I have not. But I do think people should expect more honesty and transparency in election reports.
I want to be a little more direct with you, Lactoid, and ask you just directly. Lactoid, do you think that this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump? That the Democrats and their allies are just looking for reasons and looking for things to pin on him and take him down? Do you think that is what this is?
I suspect that, and I think there is enough. I think there's enough suspicion there that I am happy that it's being looked into. And if they look into it and they don't find anything that they can go off of, then fine. Okay, I'm not saying that there is enough to say that Bragg is being politically motivated. I'm not saying that right now. Based on the timing, based on the ridiculousness of the charges, it seems to me that they're just trying to get him on something. If only they could get him on something that they could say he's now under review on, something that they can say that he might be convicted on, right? It really feels like that because they've been constantly trying that since he got elected.
Do you feel that same way about the Clintons?
I honestly don't. I guess because Hillary didn't didn't win the election. I don't know if she had been like under the same kind of constant ire the whole time.
The Clintons since the 90s, dude. Like since the 90s, with all the different investigations into them, all the different people looking into their affairs and things like that.
So there was Monica, and then there was the emails. What else was there?
Well, there was the realty scam. What was it? gosh, I forget. There's also the accusations that they murdered someone to cover up their
Okay, they didn't like investigate that though.
But this has been something that people have been going after them legally for a long time, right? Like these types of accusations, these types of things, Russiagate, Benghazi,
Well,
all
Russiagate
these
was
different
against Trump,
things,
right?
right?
Well, Russiagate was against Trump. There was the Benghazi
No,
thing,
the
but I mean, there
Russiagate.
was specifically something that should have been investigated, right?
Maybe I'm using the wrong word. I forget. There's so many, right? Yeah, that their foundation is a scam. I'm using chat here to help me out. There's a lot, and again, since the '90s, this is something that they have been going after Clinton. So I'm just curious if you think the Trump stuff's a witch hunt, why you don't apply that same lens to the Clintons.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't see. I guess I just don't see it as much as you're seeing it when it comes to the Clintons. I know of a couple instances, all of which have held water. Right? We know that Bill did mess around with Lewinsky, and we know that he did lie about it. We know that Hillary was keeping emails on a private server. Now, because there was an intent, by the way, keeping emails on a private server, keeping confidential documents in your house. I mean, that's also a little bit, I think, comparable, but I mean, not the same thing, obviously. But there was no malicious intent there, so they didn't go after her about that. Right? But she did it, right? Repeatedly, what they're finding is, yeah, they're like doing this shit, and we look into it, and there's like reasons why. Well, I guess we concluded our investigation. Either like with Bill's case, they impeached him, and or with Hillary, they decided to not go ahead with charges. But like, I'm just not seeing a bunch of like, God, if we could only get them on this, like, DAs, like, in fucking Montana, like, if only we could just fucking get them on this, and then like shooting for just ridiculous charges that have no merit. I'm not seeing that as often, so I'm just not as comfortable calling it a witch hunt.
Okay, fair enough.
I think I think your appraisal of Alan Bragg is unfair. When I found out he was going to be the person prosecuting this case, I looked into him. I mean, yeah, he's a Democrat, but if you look at the pattern of his career, he's gone after. First of all, he's been a state AG, right? He's prosecuted politicians for all kinds of corruption on the right and the left. He really strikes me like is this kind of career servant that you really, really, really want to support when they go into government, right? It's clear to me like he seems like he loves this country. He takes his job seriously. He's trying to like be a fair prosecutor. And it's just very easy for me to believe he looked at the facts here and thought there was something like worth going after. I think if you take a fair look at the man's like history, I would really hope an honest appraisal would lead you to that conclusion as well.
I think the big thing we're going to have to see, and he has until tomorrow at 10 a.m. to do so. I think we should just see what the results of the investigation here are when it comes to his character, because because they've been resistant to providing what they have to Congress thus far. I mean, there could be reasons for that as well. But as this goes on, if we keep getting kind of backpedaling, we keep getting sort of not presenting anything, then I don't know this man. I don't know his character very well. I'm just going off of what I'm seeing on the timeline and kind of what I'm perceiving about what a lot of people think about Trump generally, and the sort of we must destroy him kind of thing. But if it comes here, I will eat my words if this happens. If it comes out that Bragg had like been given a tremendous amount of like very good faith evidence that like he committed the crime, and he was like, I'm just going to do my job. I'm just going to fucking do it. I will, I'll apologize to the man directly that I had those suspicions, but that's what I'm going to think.
And if that's not true, I will apologize to you. How does that sound?
Because I will hold you both to that. Yep. I will hold you both to that. I do want to ask, again, this is kind of I'm having to adjust on the fly here, so apologies. But I have two people who want to come on. One that is very angry at you, Lactoid, and wants to hold you to task. And one that thinks that we shouldn't be prosecuting at all. Like, this is too dangerous and we shouldn't do it.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone? I know this is again.
Let's do it.
Follow me.
Again, I'm just. If RJ was here, we would have a perfect balance.
Yes.
But no one.
And I just want to say I apologize for not saying much. I know little about the topics. I'm going off of what I remember.
I understand. Well, like I said, you just jumped on just to help.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you trying. Let's bring him on.
Thanks for keeping the balance.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, if you have cameras, please turn them on.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to start.
Sock, turn your camera back off. Just kidding.
I want to start with Sock here. I want because Sock has been DMing me a little bit, and he has some issues with this case being a witch hunt and some fears about arresting Donald Trump, and I want to give him a chance to kind of lay those out to the panel and maybe have it discussed a bit, and we'll get to you, falsers. Don't worry. But yeah, stop. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so I guess let me qualify. I don't want him prosecuted for this case specifically. If the other cases are kind of brought to justice, like that's cool. But this one specifically does feel like a witch hunt because the feds had the opportunity to charge him in misappropriation of campaign funds, or, you know, as Lactoid corrected earlier, that it actually wasn't campaign funds. But the feds could have charged him, but now the feds decided not to. So now a local DA is going to charge Trump, right, on charges that are obviously lesser than federal charges, but they're trying to morph them into making it so he is guilty, right?
Can you elaborate on this? Can you be specific when you say they are trying to morph this to make it seem like he is guilty? Can you give us specific instances of them doing this?
In this case specifically?
Yes, this case specifically.
So from my understanding, this is going to end up being like a novel interpretation of the law. I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing of it. But it's like, this hasn't really been tried before in court. There's no like legal precedent for the charges.
Just went to John Edwards. John Edwards, they charged.
No, and that was different.
It's a different charge though. Okay. And I believe Lactoid could probably elaborate better than I ever could, along like how they're expanding the definitions of these charges and kind of muddying the waters a little bit and trying to get new precedent set, which I understand happens all the time in law. But it just feels like this case doesn't meet my personal burden for arresting a president or a former president. I think like there's worse things.
Let me ask you this, Suck. Why is that important? If I did this, right, and they decided that I should be arrested, I'm not a sitting president, I'm not a former president, I'm not President Sunday, I'm not any kind of president, right? Fake or otherwise. They should probably arrest me, right? They should probably charge me if I broke the law. Why is it different because of Trump? What is the difference here?
Yeah, sure. So you're pointing out like the double standard, but I think the double standard has been there for a very, very long time, right? Well, yeah, it is bad, but we're not talking about investigating every single politician out there, right? Which
we put a lot of politicians in jail already, right? Like, just for the record, we put senators and House representatives and mayors and local level politicians. Like, we put them in jail when they are found to have committed crimes. It happens pretty regularly.
Yeah, but crimes of a greater scale, no?
I mean, I don't think that there's generally much in the way of like hubbub from the media when a low-level senator or like a low-level congressman is put in jail for some kind of campaign financed. Like there was a couple of them. I just read about a couple of them like 2 days ago. A couple of GOP like former senators and House representatives that were put in jail.
Okay,
for campaign finance charge, like some kind of fraud charge, basically. I'm I can't remember the exact details, but it's not like it's unprecedented in American history to put politicians in jail, whether sitting or former. So like, why is the president uniquely like immune to certain levels of criminal justice?
I would say because he's still like massively popular, and like I acknowledge the double standard there. Okay, so before you jump down my throat, and that there is a double standard there, but it's more of like he's still insanely popular and is very likely to win the nomination in 2024, and we're talking about throwing him in jail, right? And it almost comes across like a little bit like Lactoid has said earlier, that it's kind of like a witch hunt where it's like, all right, well, and I believe Democrats have said they want to do anything they can to fucking make sure he is not elected, right? And if that means throwing him in jail, that means throwing him in jail. And I think
I'm not hearing a good argument for maintaining the double standard that you acknowledge exists just because this guy is sufficiently popular.
Right.
I think if anything, you're speaking to a problem that's long-standing in the criminal justice system to some degree, as you've already pointed out. And this is an opportunity to show the people of the United States and the people of the world that the president of the United States is not immune to criminal justice, nor is anyone else because they are sufficiently popular or wealthy.
Sure, but like you can point at January 6th, right? For instance, right? And like January 6th was, whether you agree with it or not, was partly caused by the rhetoric revolving around the election, right? And you had a bunch of people in the country that think that the election was stolen from them. Right.
What you seem to be saying right now is that Trump can direct Republicans to bully the institutions of the United States to suit his whims because he's sufficiently popular. And if we stop him, he'll throw a tantrum unlike anything we've ever seen. No. Fuck that.
Okay. I'm saying that not he can bully them. I'm saying that there needs to be a certain bar, right, before we just throw him in jail, right? Like, I'm sure.
Why is the bar not? Did he break the law? If he did, arrest him.
All right, cool. So if he got to DUI, should we throw him in jail? If he gets
DUI
DUI,
for a DUI charge like last month.
Yeah, state senator. Is that a president?
Yeah, exactly. So the president is not immune on levels that other government officials are not. Okay, this is something that is like the core of the question, and you're just begging the question instead of answering or addressing it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I don't know you. I don't mean to insult you, but you're really striking me as someone using emotional reasoning. I would really posit that when you're talking about criminal charges, that's when all of us as citizens really need to take a breath and really check our impulses, right? Like, are we acting because we want our side to win? Are we believing what we want to believe because we want our side to win? Or is there evidence to the contrary? Personally, I believe I've looked at the totality of how Trump has conducted himself over the many, many years of public life. I've come to the conclusion the guy's really not that honest, right? I can also tell you, if you're saying like, oh, Democrats want to do anything they can to put Trump in jail, I can tell you, like, if I were that kind of Democrat that were thinking like uber strategically, I'm a trillion times more afraid of Ron DeSantis than I am Donald Trump. I think if Donald Trump runs again, Biden is going to win. But that has nothing to do with my calculation in this scenario. Is this like, it really is about the rule of law and what's good for the country. And I want to be honest and say, you're not striking me as someone that holds yourself to that same standard.
Okay, I'll let you respond briefly, but then I want to get Falsers in because Falsers had some issues with Lactoid, and I want to give him that space.
Yeah.
Any response real quick?
Well, no, I mean, and Brianna, I think you are, right, that this is like an emotional argument, right? It's not like necessarily like a logical argument, but I think like you can bring in emotion into these arguments because like I think it is scary, right, to set a precedent that we are going to arrest former presidents. Like that's something that has happened in other countries that don't usually work out too well. And I really hope that like we can, you know, kind of beat the
Wait, Sock,
Well,
the
let him finish.
principle
Let
that
him,
you're
let
not,
him finish, and then you can take him to cast.
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, calm down, Portland. All right.
I can't. You're saying a bad thing.
Yes, I know I'm saying a bad thing. Okay. All right. So, but it could come across as like, hey, and we kind of already have this a little bit where like both sides are like, oh, whenever one side gets power, we're going to investigate the other side. Whenever the other side gets power, we're going to investigate the other side, and it's causing a vicious loop. And now we're going to up the ante a little bit and be like, hey, well, now you're going to arrest the Republican president, right? So now, hey, guess what? If a Republican president gets elected, and you elect a like a bar, but except worse, right? And he, you know, wants to investigate, you know, Biden and arrest Biden, and then we're going to end up on this vicious loop where it's like one side is trying to outdo the other. Go ahead, Portland.
Okay. There's two things. First of all, if you're looking for a party in the like one of the two parties in the United States to outspokenly express that they intend to pursue any and every criminal charge humanly possible, everything under the sun that they can do to impeach and try to prosecute a sitting president, or the Republicans are the ones who have outspokenly stated that they intend to use the power of the House to pursue justice against Biden in any means possible. Like they want to pursue him to the ends of the earth to try to prosecute him for criminal acts. So the rabbit's already out of the hat. Like the train has left the station. To say that we're like cautioning against it as if the Republicans haven't already expressed a stated desire to do this is just like kind of backwards. And secondly, I think that the message that countries that you spoke about, like countries that jail their former politicians, their former presidents, sending a bad like projecting a bad image to the world. I think that generally speaking, the countries that that allow their political leaders to exert such political power and influence that they are immune from criminal prosecution and immune from any like accountability for their wrongdoing, those are the countries that we typically frown upon a lot more on the international stage, and those are the countries that end up with lifelong like leaders and people who use those tools to consolidate their power and become like entrenched in the system.
Okay. I want to give Falsers. Well, first of all, Lactoid, if you had something to say on that, go ahead. But then Falsers, I want to give Falsers the floor after this.
For sure. I want to like, I guess, partially agree with Sock, but also maybe there was some miscommunication. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sock, I don't think that you don't agree with the idea that if somebody commits a crime, that they should be, you know, punished. I think the real point here and the reality is that because of Trump's position and because of Trump's personality and his history, that there is a sort of movement to try to get this guy. Like we got to get him on something. And so there's a lot of bullshit investigations. There's a lot of bullshit claims. There's a lot of bullshit being thrown at him, a lot of which isn't going to work, right? Because it's bullshit. So, you know, an actual like prosecution for a crime, yes, right? But where the real sort of injustice is, you know, the political motivation on just trying to throw shit at this guy to make it stick, when in reality, it's just a lot of it's complete bullshit.
Well, I guess this is a perfect time for Falsers to come in. This is some of the criticisms he had of you, Lactoid, in your framing. So go ahead, Falsers.
Sure.
Yeah, Lactoid, by the way, I don't hate you. I find you to be pretty pleasant on these panels. You're very civil. You're very reasonable. I appreciate that about you. Having said that, I think your positions on this issue are awful. So specifically, you stated that campaign funds can be used for anything that can help your campaign, including things like NDAs. And there's a number.
They should.
Okay, that's fine. There's a number of problems with that. The context in which you said that was in regards to the Stormy Daniels payment. And I think the principle that we should advocate to interpret our law in such a way where politicians can pay off mistresses with campaign funds is inherently absurd. I think.
Wait, stop. You're saying it's inherently absurd. First of all, I don't even know if that's illegal. I don't think it is.
It is. I'll tell you that with my next point here real quick.
Okay.
Specifically, the House Committee of Ethics has noted numerous times in looking at campaign finance laws and how they should be interpreted with legal precedent. And this is a quote from them, that bona fide campaign purpose is not established merely because the use of campaign money might result in a campaign benefit as an incident to the benefits personally realized by the recipient of such funds. And they've gone as far as to reiterate that a number of times, as far back as documenting it in a 1989 report. And the other issue we run in, I'll let you squeeze in here.
Yeah, I want to squeeze in right there because if that's true, and I don't know if an ethics committee actually has, a House Ethics Committee has the ability to bind the FEC or any other kind of like prosecutorial body to actually be able to prosecute somebody and to charge somebody with something like that. With I don't even know what they would charge them with. It might be just an advisement. My understanding is, again, this is a lot grayer than you're saying. But the problem is, again, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If that's true, if it's not a campaign expense just because it incidentally helps your campaign, and in this case, it didn't come from election funds, it came from the Trump organization, which is unrelated to the campaign, and it may have incidentally helped his campaign, well, according to the Ethics Committee, then it's not an election expense. And if it's not an election expense, then there is no felony.
Yeah, so there's an issue that a lot of people looking at legality run into, in that they say, well, this isn't explicitly stated in the law. But the reality is that our judicial system and the laws, they're not written in such a way where they're going to explicitly call out everything that could be criminal in every hypothetical, right? And that's why we have mechanisms like legal precedents, okay? And that's why attorneys and judges will look at prior cases and the rulings of those judges to interpret how they should interpret the law. And things like ethics committees at the House level and at the congressional level in general, Supreme Court rulings, those are the mechanisms we use to get into what should be legal and what shouldn't. When things like, is it legal to pay a mistress off? That's probably not specifically in the law, right? So we need mechanisms like legal precedent. No. I would posit to you that there is next to no legal precedent suggesting it could be legal, but plenty of legal precedent suggesting it would not be legal.
No.
Lactoid, he's destroying you right now.
What are you talking about? No, he's just factually wrong. There is no legal precedent that you yourself paying off.
I just read it to you.
Hold on. No. What you read to me confirms my point, right? You're saying that even if it incidentally helps your campaign, you're saying the ethics committee had this statement. Again, I don't know if it's advisory. I don't think that they have the ability to actually bind the FEC or to be able to bind any other prosecutorial body. Okay, you're saying again. You're arguing against yourself, because if you're right about this, what this means is that just because something helps your campaign does not make it a valid campaign expense. And if that's the case, then unless you can show me a specific law or a specific rule saying that using your own personal funds to pay off a mistress is all, like, for some reason an exception, and consider, show me.
Absolutely.
Hold on, let me finish. Show me a rule or a law that indicates that somebody using personal money to pay off a mistress is considered a campaign financial decision, an expense.
We just established there's not going to be any such law talking about mistresses, right? But hold on. There is law in campaign finance talking about how you can use money for campaign purposes, but you can't use it for personal purposes, right? And then they go on to break out what those stipulations are and how they would qualify into one bucket or another.
Personal money or campaign money?
Here's the bigger problem, though. Here's the bigger problem that
can you specify? Personal money or campaign money are you talking about? That's the critical part.
You cannot use campaign finance money for personal use.
He never did that.
Absolutely. You don't think paying off a mistress to sign an NDA is personal use?
No, it wasn't paid. It wasn't paid with campaign funds. It was paid from the Trump organization, not the Trump campaign.
Can I jump in here just
no, hold on. Because
this
is critically important.
This is my expertise, but okay.
I need him to answer this question. Did you know that the payments made to Cohen that allegedly was Stormy Daniels was paid out of, that had nothing to do with the Trump campaign? The money was from the Trump organization, which was not taking electoral contributions. Do you know that?
I'm going to zoom out on it here and say the campaign absolutely reimbursed him for that. Are you aware?
No, the Trump organization did, not the Trump campaign. Do you understand these are two separate organizations?
I do. Do you understand they reimbursed one another?
The Trump organization is alleged to have reimbursed Cohen, not the Trump campaign. The Trump organization did not take election.
I'm going to zoom out on here.
Can I jump
Here's
in?
The thing. I want to
everyone
explain,
stop. Everyone stop. Woo, and then Portland. Go ahead.
So this is what I do all day, every day. So if I went to my lawyer and I said, I want to get someone under an NDA, right? You would have to like justify it. If you were trying to find a way to like spend that money for the NDA in a way that doesn't show up in an FEC report, we actually do have extremely extensive laws about lending money to your own campaign. Because if we didn't, imagine how Howard Schultz would have run for president. He wouldn't have had to file anything. He could have gone out there, just built his own completely separate campaign apparatus, hired his own volunteers, had his own field staff there. He wouldn't have even had to raise money. Of course, we have extensive rules and guidelines about how you can spend money personally that benefits the campaign. It's just, respectfully, it is laughably false. I've had so many meetings about this personally.
This is
I
don't need to say anything else.
I want to finish my point though, because part of my
you haven't answered my question. You just like hand waved it and said, "I'm going to zoom out."
We did answer the question sufficiently.
I reject that you answered the question sufficiently.
That's okay. I'm still going to
let me ask you the question again. Did you know that the Trump campaign and the Trump organization are two separate organizations?
Hey, I've already answered that, and I'll answer it one more time for you, and then I'm going to move on. One reimburse the other. They're connected.
No,
okay.
Wait, no, that's not what happened.
Brianna just went through it. Brianna just went through it.
Hold on. This is an inaccurate recounting of events. Cohen was reimbursed by the Trump organization, and Cohen was Trump's personal attorney.
Lactoid. I'm going to move on.
It had nothing to do with the campaign.
Because part of my bigger point is about getting in the weeds like this. My problem with Trump stands is the
weeds matter in a criminal prosecution.
Hold on. They love to get in the weeds on these little specific nitpicky issues. And the reason why is because when you zoom out, Trump has a pattern of illegality unlike any other prominent politician we've ever seen, particularly at the presidential level. So we can sit here and talk about the Stormy Daniels case and the fact that he made payment and the fact that Trump opted not to testify. I wonder why. And he's flip-flopped on what his engagement was with Stormy Daniels a number of times, including recently when he admitted some things that were a little bit contrary to what he started with in that case. We could sit here and talk about the Georgia election law case where there's a recording of him asking for a specific number of votes, where he has clearly perjured himself after the fact, where he considered sending a slate of fake electors, where he tried to remove, what was the FBI agent's name? 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙 for not agreeing to go with the election fraud. We could talk about January 6th and all the things of that. We could talk about Mar-a-Lago. We could sit here and talk about the New York Attorney General civil filing against the Trump org for like the property issues there. We can talk about the Trump org payroll case. We can talk about E. Jean Carroll. We can talk about like the MLM Celebrity Apprentice thing. We can talk about Trump University fraud. Like the list just goes fucking on and on and on. And I don't know what it is about conservatives that you'll take one of those things and try to find a shred of something you disagree with in them and act like the other 9 don't exist when we talk about whether or not Trump should be looked at as a criminal and treated as one in the courts. But even if you could absolve him of any one of these things, you still have the other like 19 hanging over.
Hey, falsers, I'm going to interrupt and interject here. Yeah. Do you feel the same way about the Clintons? We can look at Whitewater. We can look at so you think they also Clinton stands get into the weeds and the Clintons should be prosecuted?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Fair enough.
I think when you look at any given, particularly politicians, right, which I feel should be held to a higher bar, in fact, because of the power that they're given. When you look at someone and you start to establish a pattern of legal investigations and court cases and criminality, it tells a larger story. And so like drilling it on one to try to absolve this person, it's a futile fight.
Okay.
Kind of a dangerous precedent to set that if someone has been investigated sufficiently, then we should assume that there is wrongdoing behind it, even if they're found innocent in all of those investigations, right?
They're criminal court. Look at them. They look criminal. They probably did it, right? They probably did it. Just go ahead and prosecute them. No, I'm going to respond. This is just ridiculous. We came on here to talk about this indictment. Now, you can, rant for, hours about the Trump derangement of, look at all these other times he was wrong, too. But, yeah, when we're talking about the indictment specifically that we're here to talk about, I am going to get in the weeds into it. And the weeds here are, you were so, confident that I was misrepresenting things. And then you don't even know, at least you indicated that you didn't even know that the Trump organization is who paid Cohen. And you didn't know that the Trump organization and the Trump campaign are two different organizations.
Nope.
And you didn't know that's how it
none
happened.
Of that's accurate.
No, it is accurate because I had to like correct you multiple times. I had to explain it multiple
I
times.
answered your question.
And then when I go into explaining the details, the weeds, as you put it, as to this particular case that we're here to talk about, you have to spend 5 minutes talking about how, well, look at all these other things. Look how gross he is. He once said to grab him by the pussy. What a
Let me ask you a
person.
question.
Hold on.
Such a
hold on.
waste.
Let me ask you a question.
Just a waste. Like literally hear what we're talking about.
Do you think the FEC would have been investigating the Stormy Daniels case if it wasn't relevant to campaign finance?
No, look, Trump is ugly. He probably did it, right? He's probably guilty.
No, that's not what I asked you. Do you think the FEC would have been investigating the Stormy Daniels case if it wasn't relevant to campaign finance?
Potentially. Maybe they were investigating to see if it was the case, and then they dropped it.
Court case?
And then they dropped it. That's the important. What? Say that one more time.
Do you think we would still have a court case pending with the Stormy Daniels thing if like campaign finance and no issue of illegality was there to question in the first place? Do you think these things would all still have happened?
No, okay, you're just totally like air. Okay, I'm getting a little bit heated. I apologize. Okay, so but you're saying that like the arrogance of coming in and saying that I'm wrong is astounding when you're asking about a federal agency that is not pursuing Trump right now. It's not pursuing the Trump organization and not pursuing the Trump campaign about this. And then you're saying, well, would a New York DA be organizing a grand jury if he wasn't guilty? That's not how grand jury. That's not how.
That wasn't my question at all.
Okay, please ask your question one more time.
My original question was, do you think the FEC would have been investigating Trump at the first place if there weren't campaign finance concerns specific to the Stormy Daniels payment?
There may have been concerns, but then they looked into it and they're not investigating him anymore. That's indicative that he didn't do anything. And then
that's not how that works at all.
Sure. Or okay, it's at least indicative that they couldn't go after him.
Okay, stop. I am curious, right? What Falsers thinks here, because I'm kind of on Lactoid's side with this, with the argumentation. Simply because you're investigated doesn't mean you're guilty. Do you understand that, correct?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, so what is the relevance, right? Especially since they did drop the investigation, as I understand it. What is the relevance to that? Like, how does that relate to this discussion of whether or not Donald J. Trump should be arrested or indicted in this particular instance?
I'm going to give you an analogy to kind of launch off this answer.
Like, how long of an analogy?
A very short one.
Okay, a very long analogy.
Do you think OJ killed anybody?
OJ Simpson?
Yeah.
Do you think he did? Yeah. But should he be put in jail for it? No, because he went to trial and they found him not, and they found him not guilty.
Hold on. So here's the point I'm going to make. The fact that we go and we do these long investigations is usually a pretty good indicator that there's something worth looking at in the first place, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to find an adequate bar to prosecute at, right? Those are two separate things, okay? They're not going to recommend an indictment or something like that unless they pass a certain threshold. There are lines that need to be met for these other things to happen you guys are talking about. So just
I get that. I get that. No. Stop. I get that. But we don't know, or at least I do not know, right? Whether they found a little bit, a lot, but not enough. I don't know how close to that bar they got. They could have found absolutely nothing for all I know.
Here's what I'm saying. I think you guys are kind of missing my point here. So it's both true that just because there's an investigation, it doesn't mean that there's a ton there. And it doesn't mean that there's nothing there, right? Both of those things are true. But a body that is responsible for investigating like campaign finance violations, they're not going to go in and launch a grand investigation at the federal level on a president unless there's something to look at in the first place. So to sit here and characterize the Stormy Daniels payment as irrelevant to campaign finance when there was a huge FEC investigation is inherently disingenuous.
Okay. This characterization of is essentially guilty until proven innocent. I 100% can sympathize with, that looks suspicious. Let's go take a look at it. I literally said that about Bragg. And I also said that if it turns out, there's nothing there, well, then fuck, I'm wrong. Okay. This is literally what happened here. All right. They took a look at it. Either they found nothing or they didn't find anything sufficient to go after him. Okay. Now that's done. All right. Now you're saying, well, there must be something there. And there's also like, why would there be nothing there if a New York DA, hold on. if a New York DA isn't organizing a grand jury. I mean, do you know how grand juries work? Do you know how often they decide to like recommend charges as opposed to not recommending charges? They're set up to recommend charges. This is how it works.
Let me clarify.
And they're not even doing that because they have nothing.
Yeah, I think we have a disconnect on what my point was, right? Because you're arguing something that I wasn't trying to illustrate. My point in that is that when you say that Trump's payment to Stormy Daniels was somehow disconnected from campaign finance law, is that the investigations inherently show how absurd that is. Of course,
you know nothing about investigations.
Finance law.
You don't know how investigations work.
I'm comfortable with you believing that. That's fine.
So let's clarify.
I will believe it, and everyone else should too.
Let's clarify something here. The reason that it is being considered a campaign finance violation, even though the Trump campaign did not pay Stormy Daniels, is because it was perceived to be an act in effort to like influence the campaign.
Yes.
That is the reason that the payments are being associated with the campaign, but the campaign, like the payments themselves went from basically Michael Cohen got a personal line of credit, formed a shell agency, like a shell corporation, and paid her himself. And that is being interpreted as a donation to the campaign, like because that is being interpreted as an act done in service of the campaign. But the campaign itself is not actually paid for anything.
No, that's the first accurate recollection of the allegations. That's yes.
But
what you just said is
qualifies it for campaign finance law.
It literally does not. By the ethics decision that you just read, it wouldn't. But then also there's no precedent for it to be doing that. And then also there's no evidence that Trump personally knew about it. It was the Trump organization paid Michael Cohen. That's what happened. It wasn't even the fucking
Trump has admitted
campaign
he
Trump.
knew about it.
So I want to stop.
He's saying he did.
Everyone, please. I want to rewind a bit because Wu made a point earlier about this, and I think we are not really addressing it. So I want Wu to repeat her point that she made earlier, and then I want Lactoid specifically to respond to that point because I think we're missing it. So Wu, you remember what you said?
Are we talking about the rules about what constitutes like campaign finance? Fantastic.
Yes.
Lactoid, this is really important. I understand that lawyers specialize in certain areas of law, but you're just plain wrong when you say there are no laws around the issue of the Trump organization funding what happened with Stormy Daniels. So if you're trying to put someone under NDA, the FEC does take the appearance of these things very seriously, right? They think about this. You've got to be able to make the case if you're spending all this personal money on something that could appear to be campaign related. And think about why that would be. Howard Schultz, for instance, thought about running as the Democratic presidential nominee, right? He's a multi-billionaire, right? He could go out there. He could build his own campaign infrastructure. He could have a chief of staff. He could have volunteers. He could have phone banking operations, all this dark money stuff that is not reported in any way whatsoever. Of course, there are very serious laws out there about spending your personal money in a way that could appear to benefit the campaign. The best course of action, if you did work in this field, in this area of law, I'm sure you, as someone representing your client, would encourage them to really, really be clear about these things and either make a loan to the campaign, to have the campaign make this payment, to there are strategies around this, but you're just not correct when you say this is just peachy keen. It's not.
Okay, so you said in you telling me that I'm wrong. You said that the FEC takes it very seriously.
Yes.
Is there any rule or any precedent whatsoever that a organization related to an individual cannot, using personal money, pay a legal bill, part of which is used to reimburse a mistress?
I think that's so granular, I would have to ask my lawyer, Dave Matrani. But I think you're fundamentally falling into what I would call a category error. And it's obvious. It's obviously false on its face, right?
Wait, no. You can't. Wait.
Stop. Let her finish, and then you can respond.
I thought she was finished. I'm sorry. It's hard to time.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. Go on in.
I heard him
I have a
talking, and I thought
question
she was
for
finished
Toyd.
too.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, can I answer the question? Can I respond
Yeah,
before I get my
respond
question?
before Portland asks you.
Okay. Okay. So you can't say I'm wrong until you know that, right? You just said you're going to ask. That's fine. I agree.
You made the statement.
I made the statement because I've looked into it, and everybody's saying that there's no precedent for this, that there is no rule, and like article after article is saying, yeah, there's actually not a precedent for like this specific situation, and there isn't. There just isn't. So you cannot definitively say like this is illegal. And intuitively to me, it doesn't seem illegal, and it especially isn't illegal against Trump because there's no tie between Trump and that money to begin with.
Okay, so that kind of gets to the heart of the issue.
You mentioned me. I'm going to respond very quickly. I'm talking about category error. You're sitting here talking to us like, hey, stupid, don't you understand the Trump organization is different than the Trump campaign? And what I'm telling you is the best practice is to make really, really, really sure anything the Trump campaign is doing does not appear to be benefiting the campaign. I cannot tell you how many times I had to go out of my way or give something up. Like, you have women out there running for office before childcare was legal, a legal campaign expense. They're stressing that on their FEC reports because it's like, I've got to pay a babysitter so I can go out to this meeting, but that certainly is to help the campaign. How the hell do I do this? Like, of course there are regulations around this.
I do not disagree that it's best practice to always be hyper careful.
It kind of gets to the heart of the issue, though, Toyd.
Just because something is best practice does not mean that you're actually like committing a crime if you don't follow.
Go ahead, Portland. I want to hear Portland.
Yeah, you can make a felony doing like just completely trying to cheat the FEC. You absolutely can do a felony, and that's why we have. Hold on, that's why we have lawyers, and that's why we have compliance people. When I file an FEC report, I have to have a specialized accountant go through that. If they have questions, I, as the executive director, have to be very able to answer those questions. Then you have to have a lawyer sign off on it as well. If you're a candidate, this is why you have a treasurer. The treasurer is a really big deal because you are putting your signature on there, and you can be charged with felonies.
Yeah, yes, this is
doing it properly.
Yes, if you're not doing it properly, like you are actually the one making a category error here. You're saying that if it's not within best practice, then that's evidence that it is a felony. That's not actually true.
That's
okay. Then why is it relevant whatsoever to bring up like the best practice on what you should do? Yeah, the best practice on what you should do in a self-defense situation is call the police after. That doesn't mean if you don't call the police, then that automatically makes it a bad situation, or that could even be used in a court of law to prove that it's a bad situation.
I think what's being misrepresented here by you, Lactoid, is the fact that like we can see a clear series of decisions made to like obfuscate that this was happening, that this money was being paid to Stormy Daniels by the Trump organization to buy the rights to this story. The reason that Michael Cohen got a personal line of credit, erected a shell company, and paid her himself is because it was very clear to anyone with even an ounce of skepticism or honesty that being so closely related to and like associated with the presidential candidate for the 2016 election, this act was undoubtedly going to have political consequences. And 𝕵𝖎𝖎 is pointing out that if you are the candidate for the president of the United States, you have a litany of resources at your disposal to become informed about the fact that this would create at the very least the worst impression of your practices possible and open the door to investigation for criminal conduct. And adhering to best practices was something that Trump himself was well within the capacity of doing. He is a billionaire with infinite legal counsel, but he chose to deliberately erect barriers of obfuscation to muddy the waters of what he was doing.
Trump didn't. Cohen did. Trump did not do that.
That's careful. No, that's true. We don't know. We will know that.
All we know is, first of all we know is that Cohen did it, right? A. B, no, just because he did it like in what you consider to be a shady manner, and I would consider it to be a little bit shady too, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was for political gain. It could be because, hey, we don't want people finding out about this because that's the whole point of the NDA to begin with. So we're not going to make it obvious. Hey, we're transmitting $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. Why? For porn star? No, the point is to hide it. That's the point of doing this. That the whole point of the NDA is to hide it. That doesn't make it illegal, and that doesn't make it a political campaign expense. Right? The difference here between this and the Edwards case is because Edwards was quite literally like making checks from campaign funds and mislabeling them, saying they were things that they were not, and that's against the rules.
So
I hear you. Hold on. I hear you genuinely, and I'm just gonna let the audience out there. We both made our case. You can choose who you think made a better case. I just want to say, I think that you've got to pick one, because on one hand you're saying, this is not best practice. There's nothing clear here. And I think on the other, you're saying, well, the Democrats are prosecuting this. You're arguing selective prosecution, right? You can't have it both ways. Like if you're saying, okay, I agree with you, this looks bad, it's not necessarily a crime, you can't simultaneously argue that like this is somehow motivated selective prosecution, because we both agree this looks extremely shady, and we both agree this probably runs afoul of those FEC regulations.
The first part is correct. The second part is not necessarily correct. This probably runs afoul of the regulation. No, I can't say that. I can say it looks shady in the same way I think that like the reason I'm calling it like I'm hedging everything I'm saying. I'm saying it looks like a witch hunt. It looks like Bragg is being suspicious. And I thought we even clarified this. Like, yeah, if it turns out that I'm wrong, right? I even said I don't have enough to go off of to prosecute Bragg. This is different. People are saying they have enough to go off of to prosecute Trump. This is not the same thing. Do you have? If this was a panel where we all got together and you guys made the case, here's why I think it's a little bit suspicious, and then left it at that, I lose. I lose every fucking debate on this. Yes, of course it's a little bit suspicious. I'm not doubting that. But like, there's a huge jump between it's suspicious and he's probably a criminal. He's probably breaking FEC regulations.
That's why we've got to wait for the charges to come forward. We're just speculating,
exactly
dude.
Right. But what I'm saying is, even like the proposed charges, based on everything we know, this like looks ridiculous. You even agreed it was you not
No, that's not
wait.
Like 20 of you are speaking, and we can only hear one of you. Finish Lactoid, and then we can go from there.
Not 30 minutes ago, you agreed with me that these charges are weak. You said they are really weak and they are not something that they should be going after. And that
it was not the strongest case of all of these, and I would agree with you that this is not the strongest charges that could be brought against Trump. I believe that's why I said. That's why I think.
Yes, if my memory serves me correctly, you specifically called them weak because there's a moment of agreement. There was a moment of reasonability between us because these charges are ridiculous unless Bragg drops the documents. And hey, it turns out somehow he found a certified letter from Donald Trump to Cohen saying, please, for the sake of my campaign, pay her $130,000. They find that, okay, now we have a whole different conversation. They don't have that, which because the grand jury is suspended, I highly doubt they do. You have nothing. You have nothing to go off of. This is just bullshit, and he's trying to fucking find something to stick to Trump because fuck, they hate him. They hate him so much.
Okay.
Look at this guy, Falsers. He came in and he's ranted for 5 minutes about how much he hates Trump. That's all he did.
I haven't said anything about my opinion on Trump, other than I think he's a criminal.
Falsers said he wanted to prosecute the Clintons too. Hold on, and
only when Wick held his feet to the
Hold on.
I want to try to understand something about Lactoid's point here, real quick.
Well, look, I want to look. Okay, I want finish your point real quick. I'm going to hold you to that, Portland, and then we'll go to Falsers.
Just move on. It's fine. I've talked too much.
Don't do this. No. Okay. Falsers, go ahead.
To try to divorce what Trump did with Stormy Daniels from campaign finance law, thank God people don't take the word of people on panels and Twitch, because the reality is the New York Attorney General has spent quite a bit of time making a case that he did break campaign finance law, right? And he would not be doing so if these things were not directly connected. And the way, Lactoid, you characterized the Trump org being used and Cohen setting up a shell company as something he would do just as because he was like ashamed of it because it was like a mistress and everything, it runs completely contrary to Michael Cohen's testimony. Michael Cohen testified specifically that he was directed specifically to violate campaign finance law by an unnamed candidate, right? Specifically, he called out that exact thing. So not only do we have an exact reason that he made the shell company, we know why that reason was given in his testimony. And we can sit here and have a debate about whether or not we think Michael Cohen is a credible person to take a testimony from as a witness. That's a different discussion. But you trying to divorce these issues, it's It's crazy. It's maximum copium.
Yeah.
Okay, now you bring up a new point. I will address that. Prior to 2018, you're right. He did change his story. Right prior to 2018, he was saying what his ex-attorney said, that he was always maintaining from the beginning, which was this was in order to protect the reputation of Donald Trump personally. And then later on, when things were heating up and there was plea deals on the table, yeah, there was he did change the story, and he did say that he worked with an unnamed candidate's campaign. Okay, everything stopped short of Trump directly. He said he did say he was like negotiating with and working with and keeping in the loop. And he says unnamed candidates campaign. We know who he's fucking talking about.
Sure.
He's saying it was the Trump's campaign, right? Yeah, I mean, potentially then if he names those particular people, if you want to go after them, sure, I suppose. If you find him credible, if you find his story change to be a credible thing, you can do that. But no, that doesn't mean you can go after go after Trump for a Class E felony.
Before we go further, I want to respect everyone's time. We did schedule from 6 to 8. So if anyone needs to go or anything like that, I want to give closing statements. I want to open this up. I still want to talk about this. So if you can stay if you'd like. If you need to go, I understand. But we're just to respect my guest's time, I'm going to give everyone a closing statement here. The original guests, I should say. And sorry, newbies. But then we'll just stay in. I hope you all stay, but I understand if you have to go. Closing thoughts. We'll start with 𝕵𝖎𝖎. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I am going to have to go. No, I feel like we're kind of circling on the logic here, and I think any viewer out there can listen to the arguments here. You can make your own appraisal about who in this conversation is talking about justice, rule of law, fair application of the law. You can see who is waiting to see what specific charges are brought by prosecutors here, and you can see who's trying to rearrange the furniture to come to the conclusion that they want. I urge you to make your own appraisal on that. On a bigger note here, we really cannot take our democracy for granted. There's been this real tendency over the last 20 years to just push things to the line, to ignore norms, to, conduct yourself in ways that just get worse and worse and worse every single year. And the statistics back this up. Americans overall are losing faith in our democracy. We're losing faith in our institutions like the Supreme Court and Congress and the presidency, and we are poorer for that. So no matter what you agree with today, no matter what side you're on, no matter who you vote for, I would really hope that you believe in the rule of law and you would want a fair and just application here. Wick, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you on. So we're still setting it up, but we are going to have some more stuff with 𝕵𝖎𝖎 soon. More information as it comes out, but we'll thank you for being here. Thanks for sounding off, and I'm sorry we couldn't get an RJ on, and I'm still kind of upset about that. I think that would have been a more robust conversation, but it is what it is. So thanks for being here. Portland, go ahead. What are your thoughts? Closing thoughts.
I am going to hang out for a little while. I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate the conversation. Biden's a fraud. Thanks for jumping in and providing a little bit of balance to the equation. And I think that we got a pretty good conversation out of it so far. Look forward to seeing where it goes.
Okay. Hopefully you can deal with the family issues. Appreciate you, Portland. Portland is great. Give him a follow at Portland is Burning. I'll shout him out in chat. Lactoid, closing thoughts, and I hope you'll stay. Lactoid kind of need you to stay. So
yeah, I'll take a bio break, but then I'll
go ahead.
Last thoughts. Really great conversation. I think there's a impulse to whenever we see one, where there's smoke, there's fire, and while that can sometimes be true, that's not always true, and that's why I think it is important to get into the weeds of every specific case that we're looking at. We don't assume people are guilty, and we take a look at this indictment, we take a look at the details, and I think it's clear. I think it's clear that unless something wild comes out, this is ridiculous. And hopefully you all remember this. And when nothing comes out, you'll all say, "Oh yeah, I guess Lactoid is right," as all of you always do. Every single time I come on this show, because you guys look it up. Oh wow, he's right. This is how Lactoid works.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that
if
what
you like what
happens?
that's what happens every time, Link. Every single time. But no, it was great talking to all of you. Great panelists. I really appreciate all of you. And nothing personal. If I offended any of you, I don't mean to do so. If you liked what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for being here. Again, I guess we'll open it up now. So if you've been waiting and you've been like, wow, these people are really dumb, right? Yeah, get in that backstage and jump on in. We'll pull one in now, actually.
Wick, I'm going to jump. I've got to go grab some dinner. But I appreciate the discussion,
I'm gonna head
everyone.
up,
Yeah, see you guys later.
Thanks for letting me join in the last minute.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Okay, Lactoid is on a small bio break, but we decided to open this up a little bit. We've had a few people that needed to go, and I understand that. But I know that a lot of you had opinions on this, on the arrest and indictment of Donald J. Trump, and I wanted to kind of give everyone here a chance to sound off on this. I'm not sure how much of the show you saw, Pondering. But
I saw. I was listening to it off and on. I heard some things that I wanted to address, but I don't know how they were addressed later on in the show. So it may be like I may be here for like 5 minutes, right?
Enough.
This may have already been covered. Portland, man, it's Ruminate. How are you, buddy?
Sorry, I got a little baby here with me right now, so I'm just doing a little bit of dad duty while we panel it up and enjoying this convo. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Have you seen the greatest movie of all time lately, The Last Airbender? Did you and the wife take a moment to watch any of that?
My wife's already a diehard fan. Don't worry. So
Gotcha.
It's one of those things that she's been waiting to get both of the kids seasoned on. So yeah.
Well, speaking of prosecuting people, right? Both of you need to be looked at and investigated by some committee, some institution. I'm sure we could find one, and we'll talk about this. But I guess we're all just waiting on Lactoid here, so I'll be Lactoid for a moment, right? Yeah, the case seems on its face, from Lactoid's perspective, to be fairly weak. How is this? I guess sell me on how this is not a witch hunt. If you think it's a witch, like, how is this not a witch hunt?
You said his name 3 times, and he's here. He returned.
But go on.
Well, I guess first, if Lactoid wouldn't mind kind of recapping his like overall stance on, I know this because there are 4 potential, like there are 4 ongoing Trump cases. Obviously, I think this one's about the Alvin Bragg Manhattan District Attorney one, but I definitely caught the last hour, and Lactoid was making the case that this particular case is pretty weak, and there's, of course, the legal presumption of innocence, all these things, or the legal presumption of not guilty at the very least. If he wants to add anything more to that to kind of clarify, since I wasn't listening to the whole thing, but I'd also like to know his views, because there was kind of a broader topic that was discussed at some point, and that was really what I was more interested in, which is the idea that, simply put, whether or not Donald Trump is above the law, because I know that there was somebody on the panel who was trying to make the case that it's really, really dangerous and we should avoid, prosecuting a former president. I think that's ridiculous. But I don't know where Lactoid is on that position. So if he could clarify his stance, maybe we don't disagree all that much.
Okay. To answer the question directly, I have no problem with prosecuting members of the government or ex-members of the government if they commit the crime, right? Now, I do just across the board. There's no reason why you should be unequal in the law just because you happen to be president, flat out. That's with the caveat that I think, due for political purposes, political candidates are more vulnerable to bullshit claims, right? And people going after them for all sorts of dumb reasons. And so there is a healthy level of skepticism that should be applied when we're looking at claims and charges being made against, especially celebrities generally, but especially top government members, especially controversial ones. But on the principle of, should somebody not be gone after if there's like sufficient real evidence against them just because they happen to be the president? Absolutely not. Right. Or I don't know how to phrase that. They should be gone after if,
sure,
regardless. Okay. as to and kind of tying into that, on the empirical examples on the bullshit claims. I think I've gone into why I think this claim is bullshit. I think the Georgia claim is bullshit as well. Yes, when you look at that snippet, it looks bad. When you listen to the whole phone call, which it seems like nobody's done, it all of a sudden looks way fucking better. The January 6th,
less bad. Still very bad.
No, it looks way better than how it looks like when you literally take a fucking several second clip out and blast it on the news, for sure.
Yes, it was clip chimped, but it was not robbed of its
100%.
Essential context.
No, it was absolutely robbed of essential context because he was talking specifically about votes that he thought were fraudulent to begin with.
Yeah.
He wasn't saying find me votes fraudulently. He was saying
wait, so he slipped in. That part wasn't included when he said that he thought the election was a fraud. That part wasn't included. Oh, no, that's in context. That's crazy.
So I don't agree with him, but what he said is that he was very much under the belief that a significant
I know what he said. I listened to the whole call, buddy.
Hold on. Okay, so you did, and the fact that you still hold this position blows me away because he said that he believes a large quantity of the votes were fraudulent, right? He believed they were fraudulent, and he's saying like all these fraudulent votes are flipping the election. You have to do your fucking job and find the fraudulent votes that are flipping the election and make sure they don't flip the election. Otherwise, I could lose.
Consistent with this context.
Hold on. Okay, that's the context that I think is critically important. The January 6th thing is complete bullshit. There's no legal basis that he incited anybody. And if you read the speech and you look at the fucking January 6th commission, that's evident. The one that I think there is the best shot at him actually doing something fucked up was the fact that he was keeping confidential documents in Mar-a-Lago. That's a question.
Lactoid, are you an attorney?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That helps a couple of things. Okay. Because I was like, the benefit of the doubt that you're giving Donald Trump, I don't think is rational. But if you're an attorney, and by legal rigor, there again is the presumption of innocence, then that makes sense. Otherwise, I don't think. Well, let me ask you this: do you think Donald Trump is because I don't know where you stand. I know you're conservative. We've engaged once, I think, on Prime Kai's panel. But so just to get some background here, do you think Donald Trump is corrupt?
Would I label him as a corrupt person? Probably not. No, I unless you can point to me like specific corruption that he did, then maybe.
So you okay?
And then does doing corruption always make you like a corrupt person? Does committing a crime make you a criminal? I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's like a really deep philosophical question.
It is. We're just we're cracking open the philosophy books here. It's Socrates and Aristotle all over again. So that particular adjective is not one that you would ascribe to Donald Trump. You don't think he's a corrupt man?
I would not. If I think about Donald Trump, I would think of him as slimy. I wouldn't think of him as corrupt.
Okay. Are there any other like major political figures in the United States that you would? I'm just trying to establish a baseline here of like how you view Donald Trump, just to see how I would go about having this conversation. Do you think Joe Biden's corrupt?
I don't think Joe Biden is corrupt.
Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton?
Definitely not Barack Obama. Probably not Hillary Clinton.
Okay. Sounds like that's a fairly high bar then.
Nixon's corrupt, though, I'll say that.
Right. So
you say that Trump is slimy but not corrupt. What is the distinction for you between the two?
He strikes me a little bit like a used car salesman that's not necessarily scamming you, but like really upselling this shitty car.
Isn't that a type of scam though?
Not necessarily. Not as long as you're not misrepresenting the terms of the car, right? If you're saying like, yeah, like
if you're upselling, right? If you're upselling, doesn't that imply that you're attempting to get more money than what you believe the car is worth?
Well, sure. Yeah, you're obviously trying to put the best face forward. This is why you wear a suit in an interview. This is why you shower before a date, right? Are you definitely like not like emphasizing the bad parts? Absolutely, right? But like if you're a car salesman and you say, yeah, this has 500,000 miles on it, that's not that bad.
I have a question.
It is bad, but bad is subjective.
And this is to you, Pondering. Do you go by Pondering now, right? It's not Ruminate.
You can call me 𝕍𝖎. It's my real name. Okay. It's my real name. Pondering Politics is my YouTube channel now because I rebranded from Ruminate. I still go by Ruminate on Twitter because it's what I'm most known for. I'm basically I've got like 40 names. I'm like 𝕍𝖎.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how you like to be called. That's all.
It's 𝕍𝖎. So like Messiah, but with a J.
𝕍𝖎.
What are you trying to hide from? What is it that you're trying to obfuscate?
No, I know that.
You should investigate this.
My sordid history.
I have another angle.
I slept
for
with Stormy
this.
Daniels. Go ahead.
Do you think that someone who wears makeup is being corrupt? They are misrepresenting themselves, right?
No, because I think that number one, it's such a minor alteration, relatively speaking. It doesn't reflect like.
Yeah, have you seen some of these makeup? Like the makeup.
Well, for
they do
example,
for
so I don't think that upselling a car is the same as putting on makeup. Presumably, you're not upselling the car because it's dirty, right? And it could just simply be, you could just wash off the dust. That's the equivalent to me of a shower and makeup. That was the analogy that Lactoid made here. He's a used car salesman who is upselling the car, but he's not doing so in terms of a scam. He's just trying to get more money than he believes that the car is worth. Presumably, it's not just because it needs a wash.
Can I hold on? If I'm running a pizza
Right, that was
can I say the best pizza in town? Can I say that, or is that a scam?
I think it's just an opinion, right? Do you believe it?
Exactly. So opinions are not scams, right? So this is what I'm talking about. I'm saying like a used car salesman that's like not corrupt. They're not lying to you, but they're really emphasizing like, look at that fender, as opposed to like, wow, like 800,000 miles. Like, it's got 800,000 miles anyway. Look at the fender. Like, I don't give a fuck about the fender. I'm
right, but if the used
car
car salesman is trying to sell you on the shiny chrome fender and is shooing you away from like the rusty undercarriage, that's kind of a little bit more shisty than just your average car salesman.
That's every fucking salesman ever. And this is people who wear makeup, and this is people who shower and wear a suit before an interview.
Right. No. I'm sorry. I really need you to take showering out of that, because we use that for basic hygiene. That's not to hide whether or not you're a dirty person. You can
humans can not shower for a year and be fine.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good analogous personally.
It's still a weird analogy.
Yeah,
you're just calling it hygiene. You're calling it make. You're calling.
Okay, we're getting into. We're getting lost in the analogies. We're getting lost in the analogies. I want to get back to the actual point. Go ahead.
Right. So I was asking Lactoid if he considers Trump corrupt. He said no, but then he also clarified he doesn't think a lot of other major political figures are corrupt. Sounds like it's a pretty high bar. He says the adjective he would use is slimy.
Right.
So I'll say on this particular case, I'm not particularly overwhelmed by the Alvin Bragg Manhattan case. I was kind of surprised that this was the first one that the media seems to be gathered around in terms of this is the pending indictment. It seems like Jack Smith, the special prosecutor that Attorney General Garland has assigned for the classified documents for January 6th, that seems to have more teeth to it. I would agree, but I'm also not an attorney. I didn't go to law school. I have to imagine, especially since the charges have not been dropped, and they may very well not be, right? I mean, the Trump campaign has denied that Donald Trump has been notified that charges are pending. Of course, they're also adding barricades in Manhattan, too, so who the hell knows? But I don't have any particular loyalty to this particular case. I will not dispute your characterization of it. I do think it's the weakest of the four by far. But I am also glad to hear you say that, on principle, you don't oppose the idea that a former president should be indicted if he commits a crime. I will say it's interesting because you take it's interesting to think that certain political figures, I mean, they are privileged, right? So like the idea that when Donald Trump was president, he benefited from the fact that you can't civilly sue the president of the United States, and the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel, for the past 50 years, they've held the position that a president can't be indicted for a federal crime. So while he is the chief executive, I think in many ways he is above the law, and that goes for any president, right? When conservatives reacting to this seem to be skeptical of the idea that, hey, look, if you pursue a political leader, somebody who is running for president, that's banana republic shit. Do you agree with that characterization, Lactoid, that it's banana republic shit to pursue charges against not just a former political leader, but somebody who is the political opponent of the current president?
Not by virtue of the fact that charges are being pursued. I would base it more on just like the ridiculousness of the charges, and just like the levels of intentional obfuscation that I think occur. So, and you saw this especially with like the January 6th Commission, where if you read his speech, if you look at his actions, like there's no indication that he like legally incited the riot. There's nothing there There just isn't. And yet, when you go and look at like the January 6th commission, you hear from his political opponents talking about how, like, I think quite literally one tweet read, Donald Trump unleashed a horde of rioters or like insurrectionists upon the White House when his scheme didn't work, or something, like the most charged fucking language possible.
Close enough.
Do you think that
essentially, right? But so you're saying close enough, right? I'm saying that, like, when shit like that happens, or like when they take a snippet from the fucking Georgia telephone conversation instead of like including the context, when they do shit like that, it makes me feel like a little bit like they want it to be a banana republic.
Lactoid. None of these are being done in a legal manner. These are all on Twitter.
Well, that's what I was gonna. Yeah,
I understand.
That's
I
what I was gonna ask.
I understand. Hold on. I understand it's not being done like a legal process. Well, this is being done in a legal process. And I guess January 6th was a whole commission. I guess it's not just on Twitter. And the commission itself was ridiculous as well. But these are Congress people, right? These are political opponents that I think referred charges against Trump at the end.
Ethics charges, yeah.
Yeah, ethics charges, right? And this is,
but that's political, isn't it? That's not legal per se. That's
per se. And so I guess it depends on like the definition of banana republic. Do I think
fair? Well, can we break him down by the four? Can I get you to like this Alvin Bragg case? Does that feel banana republic to you? This Manhattan District Attorney case?
If it comes out that he has nothing, I will absolutely say that feels banana republic-y.
Hold on. It's not enough for him. No. Hold on. Your burden isn't that he needs to, like, that he may have nothing, because you know that he has a shit ton of evidence, like circumstantial evidence and testimony from the people directly involved. You need for him to have produced a text message or a legal paper that says, I am Donald Trump. I am authorizing this payment of $135,000 to influence my political campaign. You have set a hilariously high and obviously impractical bar for what you would consider an acceptable amount of evidence. And to say that there's no basis for bringing even an indictment without that piece of evidence that completely solidifies the case and makes it beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think that that's not the way that we would typically want the legal system to operate.
Can I ask on what Portland's saying, Lactoid? Can you clarify? Because again, I'm not an attorney, so you'd have to clarify. Is your personal standard for the Trump situation just the blank generic legal standard, or are you imposing personally a higher burden on District Attorney Bragg because this is Donald Trump?
Legal. I don't give a fuck that he's Donald Trump. What I'm saying is that they have to prove there's a direct tie between him and Cohen, and directing Cohen to pay.
They have to do that to convict him, not to indict him.
Yes. Oh, okay, to convict him, right? But also, it's against ethics to indict somebody if you don't think you can get a conviction. All right, that's also something that happens here. So there needs to be a good faith basis. He needs to have something.
He does.
Hold on.
The testimony of the people directly involved.
He needs to. I don't give a fuck about their testimony. I'm saying that he
needs
to have.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
You can ask a clarifying question in 1 second. He needs to have some communication from Donald Trump, like personally, or like indicative that Donald Trump was like directing it to Cohen, directing the money to be spent for electoral purposes.
And Cohen's testimony is not sufficient for that. Is that what you're? Okay.
I would not say Cohen's testimony is sufficient for that, because Cohen didn't even testify that he got a direct order from Trump. He said he was working with various people on his campaign, right? That's what he was talking about. And if you want to go after them, if he can produce their names and you go after them and show the communications there, and then he could even testify. I'd be fine with him testifying, but that's not what he's saying. That's not what he testified to. That's not what he pled guilty to. And you have to show that connection to Trump. If you don't have that, then I will say this is banana republic.
I want to give Jenny a chance to ask her clarifying question. Go ahead.
Who are you pointing to, Wick? You were pointing.
Jenny, I'm making the general hand wave. Go ahead. Jenny.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, for 2 hours, you guys focused on the Cohen-Daniels payment, when literally in this case, it's a breadcrumb on the trail to the indictment in regards to tax fraud. That's what this case is about, is tax fraud. So
that's what Cohen's case is about.
That's what this is about. This is about Trump's tax. No, yes, it is.
Cohen's charged with tax fraud, and this is information he's furnishing as part of his plea deal.
Cohen was charged with tax fraud. This case is also in regards to Trump's potential tax.
You mean
fraud.
falsifying business? I'm sorry to interrupt. You mean falsifying business records, right? Okay.
As yes, which also constitutes a part of tax fraud in the state of New York. This is not about election campaign fraud. This is about taxes and taxes only in the state of New York.
And
so,
yeah, the
like,
articles
why
I
would,
read
like,
was like the most likely
yeah,
path for an
Yeah.
indictment.
and
Also,
that's what
they
I've
could
read.
all
pointing
also
out
get on
one
the
thing that you said
Prosecution,
a
I
couple
guess,
minutes ago
too.
that's factually Lactoid. One thing you said a couple minutes ago is factually incorrect. You said that Michael Cohen said that he was directed by Trump organization officials. His testimony to the grand jury last week, like part of the testimony that he submitted and clarified by his lawyer, he was directed by Trump, cited as individual one in the records, like in the court records, to perform the act directly.
And he said, and for the record, individual number one is President Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when he was convicted, he was talking about the organization officials. If he just recently testified to the grand jury and he said that it was directly Trump, and this is yet again another change in the story. Maybe
it's a clarification, right?
Maybe it could be. I guess it could be clarification as well.
Yeah.
I suppose. Now, I guess I haven't seen that particular statement. I know that his former attorney also has been in front of the grand jury, who basically said Cohen's full of shit. This is actually what he's been saying the whole time to me. I'm his former attorney. This is what we talked about. I mean, there's that as well. If Cohen actually is now saying, if he went in front of the grand jury and he's now actually testifying, I guess the third change in the story, if he's actually saying that, yes, Donald Trump directed me to spend this for campaign purposes, then I think that there probably is a basis to at least have a trial over it. But
okay, so you agree with the indictment then, and you want to see it move forward. You just don't think that there's sufficient evidence available to the public to convict. I win. I won the debate. All right.
Well, hang on. So Portland,
I don't think Bragg. I would need to see something that Bragg thinks would like. Yeah, I can actually get a conviction.
So, well, actually, to clarify what the exchange we just had there, Lactoid. So, bringing an indictment is not an indicator that this is banana republic shit. Again, I'm just paraphrasing the common right wing talking point. What about a failure to convict? Like if you could be sufficiently persuaded that District Attorney Bragg has a sufficient basis to begin an indictment, but let's say he fails to convict. Is that indicative of banana republic shit? Like he takes a good faith shot at Trump, this case fails. You wouldn't say, okay, that's banana republic shit, right? That's just a district attorney doing his job in good faith, right?
The opposite, right?
As long as the evidence
is a legal challenge.
Yes.
No, I know you agree, Portland, but Lactoid, I'm trying to gauge where Lactoid is with this. I'm sorry, Lactoid, could you repeat that?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the evidence that Bragg is going off of is in good faith, then and it's like sufficient evidence that he believes is sufficient to convict Donald Trump, then no, I don't think that's like banana republicly necessarily.
That's fair.
But like if the evidence fucking sucks and he's like going after him, then it would be. So
let me ask you this as an attorney too, because I'm just curious. So my personal skepticism, because I know initially, Alvin Bragg inherited this case. I think the original prosecutor was a guy named Vance, if I remember correctly. It's been so long since I've dug into this.
Letitia Vance, the Attorney General for the state of New York.
No, that's Letitia James. I thought that he inherited. I thought Bragg inherited this from this case. I'm pretty sure this investigation began under his predecessor, Bragg's predecessor, before he became the district attorney for Manhattan. But that aside, I know that for a while this was basically mothballed. So Lactoid, tell me this: given the high profile stakes, it seems to me, again as a layman, that a district attorney, given the stakes, given the high profile nature, given who the subject is it reasonable to conclude that he would not bring an indictment against Donald Trump unless he was fairly certain he at least had a decent chance of making a credible case? Or am I crazy for believing that?
Prosecutors bring bullshit cases. That happens.
I hear you, but I mean, but with the stakes like this, you know what I mean? Like,
yes. With this, I think the stakes like this make it more likely that it's bullshit. I think that there's a tremendous amount of like political benefit to have somebody under investigation during a campaign. We saw this with Hillary, right? There is reason to be suspect whenever like they time it for a fucking political campaign. There is more reason to be suspect than if it's some other fucking rando on the street.
Yes and no. I'm not. I mean, I hear you on paper, but I also think that you're talking about two different bases. I think I mean, but this is my personal skepticism here as a politics geek. I think the Republican Party, by and large, is a bit of a cult of personality. So I'm not entirely sure that Trump being under indictment would have a meaningful effect on swaying his base, right? You know, he's fluctuated a bit in the polls with Republicans, but now he's still like after the special counsel regarding like the classified documents last year, Governor DeSantis was consistently polling in aggregate ahead of Trump, and now it's flipped again. Trump has regained the momentum. I'm not entirely sure, and I guess it doesn't disprove that that's a reasonable calculation. But if I were Alvin Bragg, I would not be entirely sure or confident that simply because Hillary Clinton being under indictment undermined her momentum, that would be the case for Donald Trump. I think it could very easily have the opposite effect.
I'm not saying that's like in the mind of Bragg. What I'm saying is that we know that indictments and we know that like investigations and charges and stuff like during a political campaign can absolutely have an impact. And this is a reason to be skeptical. This is a reason to view them in a skeptical.
But if that's not in his mind, but if you're not saying that that's
I can't prove one way or another whether like what's in his mind. What I'm saying is that like again, you know, you guys see something suspicious, you want to like take a look at it. I'm saying there's something suspicious, and Congress, the House Republicans are taking a look into it. Right, I'm happy about that. They should look into it to see if there's any evidence of political meandering here. One quick clarification I wanted. Right, but one quick Portland. I've been looking. You're saying like you have any evidence, like anything that I can take a look at that Michael Cohen indicated that Donald Trump like spoke to him about using this for like electoral purposes.
Yeah, just a second.
For electoral purposes.
Wait, that wasn't what
I'll link it to you.
That was the direction of the payment being made to Stormy Daniels. There, I didn't say anything about like, oh, and he said in this like that it was to influence the election. I don't know like the exact.
I sent it to your DMs, Lactoid.
Thanks.
Okay.
You're welcome.
But for this purpose, for the purposes of the timing, it is a full year before primaries begin. Like it's not. I think, like, under our current system, it is ridiculous to call this during the middle of a campaign. Like this is like, yes, he has said he wants to run, but like this isn't a campaign season. This is not campaign season. This is prior to campaign. So saying that this is in order to like skew the campaign off the rails is. It just feeds into this, like, you know, campaign seasons lasting 4 goddamn years, which I think I hope we can all agree is very tiring. We need to knock this shit off.
So, Lactoid, out of curiosity, you said earlier that, you know, we see something suspicious, so we support, you know, it being investigated. You see something suspicious in the initial suspicion, and House Republicans are planning to probe. I don't know. Has it been established whether or not they have like a congressional basis by which to run an inquiry on District Attorney Bragg's case? I thought that was being disputed.
It's probably being disputed. They haven't sent anything like any kind of like official subpoena. They just basically gave him a deadline of tomorrow at 10 a.m. to provide the documents.
Let me ask you this.
Question about whether or not that's enforceable.
That's fair. Let me ask you this. Do you, given, I think you would agree that whatever Alvin Bragg feels about Donald Trump, I'm sure at the very least you would agree that House Republicans are biased to look at this a particular way at least as much. Actually, let's cut the bullshit. We have much more to say that House Republicans have a vested interest in finding political bias in the case of Alvin Bragg. Like they have a political motivation to cover Donald Trump's ass. I'm sure you would agree with that. So would you trust their scrutiny into this? Like their scrutiny into Alvin Bragg's case, do you trust it given that, as far as we know, based on what we can evaluate now, their bias towards defending Trump is infinitely greater?
Right. I would not want just the House Republicans doing the investigation. It would have to be the whole House. Now, if the Republicans were like the ones calling for it, but if it's just the Republicans, then they're like hiding what they got, and they're saying, "Yeah, we think this happened," but they're not showing it. Yeah, that'd be fucked up. That would not be.
I sent you the source on the information you asked for, Lactoid. I also posted in the group.
Thanks, Portland.
I got it from Pondering.
Well, guys, that's really. I'm sorry, Wick. That's all. I thought there'd be more to fight with, but I've only engaged with Lactoid once, and he was pretty reasonable, and he's I think been relatively reasonable here, even though I'm obviously Team Portland. But Lactoid's also an attorney, so I guess just by definition, he's morally inferior to the rest of us anyway.
True. And
would you say Lactoid?
on whether
default.
or not we can bully him ethically, and I think we can, right? I think that is morally good, not just morally neutral.
Can we have a panel about that?
We
sometime?
could have a panel about that.
About
today.
whether or not it's morally okay to morally acceptable to bully Lactoid, and Lactoid has to be here, but he can't defend himself. He has to outsource
Sit
his
through it
representation.
like a roast, almost.
Yes,
that would be interesting. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, gang, we have kind of circled the drain on this one. Thank you for being here. Sorry I was a little scuffed. We had a no-show, and that sucks.
Howard.
Sorry.
I mean, maybe he's in the hospital somewhere. Maybe he has a good excuse, right? I don't know.
Listen, every hospital has internet connection. It's unacceptable, really. When a man makes, listen to me, those of you who are still watching, when you make a commitment to John Wick, aka Wickles, aka Don Wickles down there, you honor your obligation, hospital or no hospital. Portland is literally holding a newborn, and he is still here. You see that? Like, that is commitment.
If you can't, if you do agree to come on my show, but then can't make it for any one reason, even if it's last minute and you're like, oh, something came up, tell me, right? Don't go radio silence, right? Don't go radio silence. Don't tell me. Don't just no show. Say, hey.
Look, if I were a Trumper on this topic, I'd throw up the walls and run as far as I could. Too.
I overslept. Hey, something came up. I can't make it. Just etiquette. Okay. Well, let's rate out, gang. Oh, what do we got coming up this week? Well, tomorrow, no show on my end, but at 8 o'clock we're gonna go on Madame Genevieve's panel, and we're gonna talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that should be fun. So tune in 8 o'clock on Madame Genevieve show for that. Friday, I'm going to be speaking with Kidology and Prime Kai about woke and what that is. That should be an interesting conversation. Yeah, that's what we got coming up, gang. If you like this content and you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. Leave a comment if you so choose. If you're on Twitch, feel free to throw me bits. Feel free to throw me subs. All of that helps the channel out, helps me eat. Thank you, 𝕵𝖎𝖏 for the bits. Thank you, Feder, earlier for the bits. Thank you for those who have subbed today. Really appreciate you all. MSRP. Thank you. This really helps me out. This really goes a long way. I can't do this for free, and yeah, I need money. So okay, who are we rating out to? That is the question.
I was gonna say too, one more thing. To get Wick to 3,000 YouTube subs, Lactoid has made the solemn vow that if Wick gets to 3,000 subs, he will pledge to vote for the Democratic nominee in 2024. Don't ignore him.
Canadian.
Okay, let's
dirty
go.
Canadian. He can't even vote.
We're all holding into that.
Let's go to let's rate out into Nina. And say hi to her.
Nice hanging with you guys. I hope you all have a good night, and you guys feel free to follow me at Portland is Burning on Twitch and Twitter. Thank you for having me.
Do it, gang. Okay, yeah.
Absolutely.
Make sure that you tell her that Wick sent you, and spam those emotes if you got them. Thanks again for the subs. Thanks again for the talk. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Little baby says bye.
Pondering, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely, sir.